Board. This is our 27th and final meeting of fiscal year 2016. I'm Brian Furs, the chair of the planning board, and I will call this meeting to order and ask my colleagues to introduce themselves, starting to my right.
I'm Alex Whiteside. I'm a member.
Michael Kelly, member.
William Clark, Planning Director.
Julia Getman, clerk.
Tim Sawinski, assistant town planner.
April Amaro, member.
Great, thank you. We have two meeting dates to announce, July 14th and July 28th. Those are both our regularly scheduled meetings. We have some meetings to approve. I believe we had comments last time and we needed to give people a chance to review them.
I haven't gotten any comments back. Everything that's been commented on, Alex commented on the December 17th, which I fixed and redistributed.
I don't think we voted on them though, right?
No.
Okay.
And I have some changes on June 9th. And you have something later than that?
The May 26th minutes were first sent out beginning of June, so those have been around for a while.
But you didn't, I thought I gave you comments on those.
Yeah, those have been.
Oh, okay. Well, then they should be.
So I think we can approve December 17th and May 26th tonight.
Why don't we do that? So moved.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I can't vote on December minutes.
Okay, so.
And here are my suggestions for,
Great, thank you.
How about I just abstain from that vote?
1 and 1.
That's fine.
Approve 1, abstain 1. No, of the two sets of minutes.
301.
There you go. They're approved. All right, we're going to start with citizens speak. We are then going to go into some new business items, provided we are not beyond our public hearing scheduled time. We have to discuss the release of the Carberry subdivision covenants, the discussion on reconvening the condominium working group. We're going to look at an A&R for Central Avenue, and we are going to discuss the 556 Adams Street, Navara patio seating. We have a public hearing scheduled for 7:15 on the Fair Nursery special permit for landscaping business use. And we have several items on old business that we will attend to as we see fit during the meeting. Is there anyone here for citizens speak this evening for an item that I did not speak about? Yes, sir.
The Carberry Estate subdivision proposal for a zoning change,
Yes,
is that
please.
separate than the item you mentioned?
You should come forward now for that, yes. Could you introduce yourself and your address for the record, please?
Yes, the name is Ken Mader. The address is 1703 Canton Avenue.
Okay.
And I had a question and then maybe a comment after I get the question answered, just for clarification. The proposal on that, under discussion at this point, is for a zoning change, and I'm just looking for some clarification of what the board looks for in taking into account their guidance on that type of change. What is the intent that they're looking for?
When a new zoning article comes before the board?
Yes.
Alex, I'm going to look to you for that, if you don't mind, due to your history with the board.
Well, there's a potential zoning change for the Carberry estate. It's currently zoned AA, and they want to, the developer wants to zone it for townhouses. And the zoning would be developed to permit townhouses under conditions and terms and that have been suggested by interested people, including residents. In other words, the zoning would be probably, unless the developer submits it, but even if the developer submits it, the planning board would likely make changes. So it depends on what the proposal is. The zoning presumably would enable the proposal to go forward, because that's the reason for the zoning.
Yeah, so, but my understanding is there's a zoning that would allow single-family housing, and then there's zoning that would allow a cluster development.
Right.
And to deviate in whatever thought process was, this is why we have that zoning in place. What would you be looking for that says, what's the advantage that you would be looking for in order to say we support that change? What are you looking for?
Well,
It would say, what would be the benefits of it?
It's a theoretical question, but the developer has said, I'd like to either zone some townhouses. The developer has said that if you don't zone some townhouses, I may have to do a 40B development because I don't want to do a cluster and single-family housing on 2 acres. Whether or not the developer would change the developer's mind is something you'd have to ask the developer.
So to a certain extent, it's driven by 40B and it's driven by the developer's application. And so the planning board is going to consider the application. It's going to consider the input of the community and the neighborhood. It's going to look at this actual site in context with the application. It's going to take all of those factors in mind, and it's going to have in the back of its mind what do we want to have control over the site in some way with a zoning modification, or do we want to essentially surrender most of our control due to the comprehensive permit process that is offered to the developer through 40B in the community. So that's sort of why it's before us. Mm-hmm. And the board will take all of that into consideration and figure out where to go.
So thank you for that clarification. That helps me understand it a little bit more. And then just separately, where I currently am as an abutter is I haven't seen anything from an advantage at what's been presented so far. So just as a current position of, I'm not there yet to the current state. So that was my comment based on the information we responded to. So that was it.
Well, I'm sure the developer will be in touch with you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here to speak for citizen speak on any of any non-advertised or non-notified, non-agenda items? Okay, so seeing none, we're going to move on to, I think, how quickly can we do the A&R bill?
3 minutes.
Okay, let's
less.
let's see if we can
Or
make
less.
This is a great A&R.
It's actually,
Especially, I mean, this is the A&R. We approved one of the lots without any frontage, and now they've made them all into real lots. It's a truly great
You're right, look at
A&R.
that.
they have, same owner owns all 3 houses. The same owner is here. He'll come up to the table. Mr. Hannigan actually dropped this off. Mr. Hannigan is in Ireland, so he couldn't come. Each one of them has their 100-plus feet of frontage. Each one of them has a new lot line because they've all traded lot areas. It does square things up, it does make things correct, and it makes things conforming where before they were non-conforming.
A very nice, clean plan. If Mr. Hannigan were here, we could tell him what a great job he did.
I don't know if we want to do that.
All right, does anyone have any questions?
All right, we'll keep it under our hat.
Thank you. And if you vote that I'll sign the Mylar when he comes back.
Well, if anyone has any other questions on this.
Just curious.
You know where they built a new house? Right after the pond?
Right after the pond.
You're going, who's the club's over there?
Okay.
You know where they built a new house over here?
Yeah.
This is the new house.
Okay.
All right. Do we
I
have-
would. That hand, I assumed, was that you're on board with this?
Yeah.
I would make a motion that Mr. Clark be authorized to endorse this plan as not requiring subdivision approval.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 4-0. Sorry, we should have let you introduce yourself. You came all the way out, but thank you.
The 10
All right.
minutes of fame.
Look at
up in
that.
smoke.
Yeah, I've completely spurned his time. We've got right at 7:15, so we're going to open the continued public hearing for Thayer Nursery for a special permit for landscaping business use. Mr. Clark, I'm going to look to you to introduce this.
I think I'm going to let Tim introduce it.
All right.
So, I think yesterday I emailed out a revised application that looks something like this, without the pink highlighting, as well as some exhibits. The exhibits, with only one or two exceptions, are documents that are already in the application that we've already seen. They're just sort of organized in a different way. This revised application largely tracks the language of the special permit that Thayer Nursery has already been issued. With a few changes, I provided everyone with a clean copy and a red line copy. Those are in your binder clipped packages. A lot of the
So the
This-
packet, the one that was in our packet is moot.
the one that was delivered on over the weekend, yes. Well, moot. It's just not the most
Well,
recent
it's been
revision.
redlined, yeah,
Yes.
okay.
So a lot of these changes are just sort of grammatical and sort of just to kind of rework the language in order to make it into an application. There are a few changes that we can walk through. I don't know if Josh or Maggie want to take a stab at just letting you know what the differences are. I have them flagged. I don't know how you want to proceed with this.
Why don't we have Tim, he's doing so well,
Okay.
continue.
And I think we need to go through it all the way, from the top to bottom. Even if it's a minor change, I think we should
Yeah.
just look at the red line.
So the first, I'm going to go through sort of major, not major, but sort of additions that are of interest, and then some things that Josh and Maggie have put in that I think are worth taking the time to discuss. The second paragraph on the first page, applicants are successors in interest to Robert C. Oldfield and Margaret T. Oldfield, who hold a special permit under the provisions of Section 387D, dated, that's new. That just sort of lays out their eligibility under the zoning to apply for and receive the special permit. There's a few additions on pages 3 and 4, and also later on. One of the new exhibits that hasn't previously been in the application that is new are a pair of affidavits from Josh and Maggie attesting to a number of things, including the number of employees in July 2012, the amounts of materials, firewood, dirt, etc., and then also the fact that snow and ice removal was a business in 2012. I think that sort of threads a needle that I think the board struggled with in terms of how to deal with those issues. So those affidavits are in your packets. We have stamped originals in the office, and so those are there. Moving on onto page 8, and I'm actually looking at the clean copy. The red line copy sort of tracks, but I'll try to. On page 8, it's E3B. This is the bit about the fence. B is language that addresses the issue of the fence along the Stevens property line. This is something we discussed at the last meeting in terms of the 15 fence setback along the other property lines is a 9-foot setback along the Stevens line as a means of preserving some mature trees that I think everyone involved thought was a better, more complete buffer than just having the fence. At 15 feet, they would have had to have knocked those trees down. So that subparagraph B addresses that issue. And then there's there's an email from Chris Stevens in your packets that confirms the discussions that we had with Bill and Josh about that issue. Right below that in subparagraph C, and this is one of those changes that I would flag just to talk to Josh and Maggie about, because that's it's an addition that
Sorry, can you say the
it's just the
addition
next
again?
the next subparagraph C. I haven't said what the addition is yet. So it says the applicants will install 3 up to 10-foot wide, 8-foot high access gates constructed of high tensile fencing with attached sound attenuation panels. The gates shall be the gates shall be as shown on the site plan. Insofar as possible, there should be no gaps between the fence and the gates when closed. That insofar as possible clause is an insertion into the application. And there's a similar addition on the next page. This is page 9 of the clean version under F, operations. The second paragraph, operations at 217 to 237 Hillside Street are shown on sheet 4. Composting may be conducted in the area shown. This area shall be buffered by the planting shown on sheet 4. And then this is an addition, insofar as possible, composting shall be reasonably odor-free and conducted in a reasonably quiet, efficient manner. Again, that insofar as possible is an addition. Moving on. This is another change that was made, and when I say change, I mean from the language of the special permit. 98.5% of this tracks the language of the special permit that was issued. We're under O, rules. If you look, comparing the red line to the clean copy is instructive here. Subparagraphs 2 and 3 were sort of merged so that a new subparagraph 2 reads, applicant shall not leave bobcats, trucks, and other vehicles with engines running unattended at any time. There shall be compliance with section 16A of chapter 90 of the general laws, stopped motor vehicles, operation of engines. That language was split between 2 different bullets. But there was a clause in the old subparagraph 3 that was deleted that used to say, applicant shall not allow bobcat or truck engines to be idling when attended for more than 5 consecutive minutes. So the old 2 dealt with unattended bobcats, and the old 3 dealt with attended bobcats, basically. Those have been sort of merged and changed into a new subparagraph 2. Under Q, snow and ice removal plan, subparagraph 5, an affidavit attesting to the level of snow and ice removal activities in 2012 is attached as Exhibit C. It's actually Exhibit F, but that's just something that can be cleaned up. On page 19, this is in, I don't know what the main section is. Oh, I think it's section 7. E, on-site traffic loading deliveries, subparagraph I, or subparagraph 1, excuse me, required log. There was a deletion here in the I guess it's all the first sentence. Delivery shall not be made outside of permissible hours. Second sentence. In the event of not compliance, a log of any deliveries made outside of the hours specified in paragraph 4I, list of business activities, shall be kept on site in the sales office for review by the building commissioner or his designee, the Board of Appeals, the planning board, as requested to the building commissioner or designee. The old language included a line about members of the public. I'll read the old language just so you can get a sense. A log of any deliveries, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, on site in the sales office for review by the building commissioner or his designee, the Board of Appeals, the planning board, and members of the public as requested through the building commissioner or designee. The way that this has been changed, and members of the public has been deleted, but that as requested through the building commissioner or designee is sort of now attached to the planning board's request for records. So that's just something to keep an eye on. And then finally, on page 23, in 10D, review of required records. The following records shall be kept in the sales office and shall be made available with an appropriate amount of notice for inspection by the building commissioner and/or his designee at the building commissioner's request. There's two changes to that paragraph. The first is the insertion of the clause, an appropriate amount of notice, so that it reads, shall be made available with an appropriate amount of notice for inspection. And then there is a deletion that I'm going to just go to the red line for this one. The deletion was and copying. So it used to say for inspection and copying by the building commissioner. Now it just says for inspection by the building commissioner. And I said finally earlier, but I was just kidding. Later on in that paragraph, the final sentence, records shall be updated on an applicable seasonal basis as relevant information is received or changed. That language used to read, records shall be updated on a regular basis. So instead of a regular basis, it's an applicable seasonal basis. So, you know, Josh and Maggie might be able to explain what that time frame would be. And that's it in terms of, you know, the assumption here is that there's a familiarity with the special permit that was issued, and there's a sort of level of this is a good document that's already been voted on. So these are the sort of the major changes to that. Like I said, if you look through your red line, there's a lot of cross-outs and insertions, but this is really just to sort of take that language and kind of make it more of an application as opposed to the final product. So that's that.
Okay, so that's essentially technical review as well. You're saying that you've looked at the application to say that it's complete, in line with what you just redlined for us. All the exhibits are consistent?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I have a question about the process of this application, and it's open for discussion. I'm not rendering an opinion when I ask this question. Should this be a new application, or are we comfortable with it being an amended application? I know that came up a fair bit in the previous special permit, the fact that the applications were changed subsequent to their submission. It was something that was talked about quite a bit, and so I put out there whether or not we should request that this be submitted as a new application as opposed to an amended application. I put that out there to both staff and the board for comment.
Well, let me comment if I might.
For our attorney, I'd love to hear from you.
We have an application dated, when was the application dated? A month or so ago? And we've had one hearing on that application, and at that hearing, the applicant said, we basically want the old special permit reissued with a few changes. And clearly what they submitted did not have did not really say that, did not say, give us the old special permit with a few changes. It went through a lot of stuff that it probably shouldn't have. But this fixes it. And if we required a new application, there'd have to be new advertising and new notice to neighbors. And you know, the fact that they're not represented at this point, I mean, that's their decision, but I do take that into account. And what we've got here is something we can work with, and I think that if we I mean, the people who are interested know that this is basically asking for reissuance of the permit that was granted and then questioned by the land court because the paragraph in section whatever it was said D2 or 4 rather than D7. You know, we put a lot of thought into that last permit, and what we intended to do with that permit was to make matters better for everyone, better for the applicants and better for the residents. And I don't know, I think that we'd better, we could require a new application, but we can also allow an amendment. Town council, you know, as you may recall, when we were doing the initial seemingly endless application,
Right.
Town council said that an amendment is proper. And here, everything is in a fairly concise form. And I'd recommend that we allow the amended application to go forward. One final thing we should have part of the record is the prior special permit should be part of the record.
Yep, I was going to bring that up as well. Any other?
Yeah, I agree with the amendment. I'm not certain why they didn't come back with the exact same application, why there was any need to change anything.
Yeah, well, we'll certainly get into that conversation. I just want to make sure we're all comfortable before we have that conversation, because
Okay.
that's gonna, we'd have to have the same conversation again if it came back as a new application. We'd have to start over again. So
Right.
let's talk about application, then we'll go there.
Okay.
So, my perspective is, generally speaking, in the situation, I think if you're making changes to applications, you should withdraw them and resubmit. Because I think the neighbors and the neighborhood has a right to know what's being proposed. And if you have a hearing on one thing and then it's significantly changed and brought back, it just isn't very transparent. But in this case, I mean, I'm late to the party. You guys have done all the work. This has been thoroughly vetted. I think the neighbors knew what the last permit said and had ample time to communicate their feelings. So this is a little bit of a different animal. So I would be comfortable with this adjustment tonight.
Anything from Bill or Tim? Okay. You know, basically, I'm going to agree with the feelings of the board. I think I share April's concerns generally that when you're making changes to an application, the neighbors need to be able to look at it and comment on it. I think in this case, most of these changes are administrative changes. The one that's probably the most substantive is the relocation of the fence, and the affected abutter has given testimony through the application that they're okay with it. So I think I think we're okay. I just wanted to make sure that the board had the conversation. So with that, I think we also should, per Alex's recommendation, we should address the old special permit. And I know that Bill Clark has something on that for us, correct? Or that maybe it's Tim, that we did receive something from town council on the old application, on the existing special permit, whether or not we need to,
Don't rescind it.
don't rescind. So can you just tell us why on the record?
I can tell you why.
All right, let's
The
go
reason
now.
is that the other special permit was issued under section, section 3A7, no, 3A 2 and/or 4.
Okay,
And that's what it was issued under. They had to have a special permit that was issued under 3A7, 3A 2 or 4. And there was a discussion of whether or not their special permit was issued under this section, and town council seemed to think that it wasn't. So, in any event, we granted that special permit on the basis that it was granted under paragraphs 2 and/or 4. And the land court has said, oh, well, we agree with town council, it wasn't. So the zoning was changed to allow a special permit under 3A7D. So it's a different application. It's a different special permit. The applicant has to be in a different stance. And since it's a different application, a different permit, there's no need to rescind the other one.
okay. Is everybody okay with that? Great. Mike, before we go into the merit, I would like to let the applicant give their commentary on why they're here tonight, so, on these specific changes, and then we'll have a conversation about it. So, the applicant like to come forward?
Can I make one comment at a time? Tim, you made comment that you reviewed, and at the beginning you spoke about you'd probably just go over some of what you considered, other than just administrative, grammatical changes that had some significance, if any. Could you just make sure that we get from the applicants why they felt those were needed? In other words, if they go through 3 of them, I'd like you to speak up and say, well, what about this 4th and 5th and 6th one over here?
Watch him like a hawk.
Make sure we get an explanation.
We'll watch him like a hawk.
Do you want Lauren's letter? It's like 3 sentences.
Yeah, why not read it into the record while we're here?
I think it makes more sense to leave the special permit alone. At this time, the land court has enjoined their nursery from using the special permit. I do not think it necessary for the planning board to rescind the special permit. Sincerely, Lauren Galvin, Esquire, Murphy, Hesse, Toomey.
Thank you. And for the heck of it, why don't we print that out and put it in the file? Okay.
Good
Welcome.
evening.
Please introduce yourselves.
Josh Oldfield, 24 Forest Street, Milton.
Maggie Oldfield, 237 Hillside.
I viewed the permit just as basically the same permit with 2 or 1 change. The fence line, the bones, nothing else changed as far as I thought with regard to hours of operation, materials, the day-to-day operation didn't change. In my opinion, it was grammatical in nature, and just a cleaning up.
Okay. So, and do you have anything else? Okay. So there were Tim, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 substantive. Wait a minute. 6, 7, 7.
You want to just walk through it?
Quickly, so that we can understand the basis for it, and then we'll probably have questions.
So the first couple, the addition of the applicants or successors in interest to Robert C. Oldfield and Margaret T. Oldfield. I think that's sort of speaks for itself. Additionally, sort of the addition of the affidavits, I think that's just a good addition. And I don't know if anyone has any questions about that. Ditto with the fence. There's the correspondence with Mr. Stevens regarding that, and we've kind of talked about that before.
Yep.
The next one, and these are two related insertions. Applicants will also install 3 up to 10-foot wide, 8-foot high access gates constructed of high tensile fencing with attached sound attenuation
What
panels.
page?
This is it's page 8 of the red line. Might also be page 8 of the clean application.
Okay.
The gates shall be shown on the site plan. Insofar as possible, there should be no gaps between the fence and the gates when closed. I guess that insofar as possible is the meaningful phrase there.
If we're gonna do these one at a time, I actually wanna go back to the fence for just a moment.
Okay.
So, actually, I don't think I want to do it that way. Can we just walk through them all?
Okay.
No, we already did that, I'm sorry. So let's do it one at a time. Does anybody have anything on the fence for the?
Well, insofar as possible,
That's-
aren't they going to explain
That's what I'm looking
why they
for.
want it?
Yeah, okay, so.
Why
then
not let 'em-
So then let me ask you a question on the trees first. The purpose of moving the fence is to preserve those mature trees.
Yes.
There was some discussion back and forth that I had with Bill Clark about if the trees in the future are no longer there because they perish or whatever, should we move the fence back?
Yes.
So I'm actually fine with the application the way it is, so long as we add the words "and as necessary" replaced, so that those trees are replaced if they ever, I mean, eventually they're going to pass away, so. That, you're okay with that addition? Okay, great.
What was that language, please?
And as necessary replaced. That would be after, it should say, trees shall be preserved and as necessary replaced. Okay. Now, if you could address the insofar as possible, give us some clarity as to why that's necessary with regard to the gaps in between the fence and the gates.
Just knowing the construction methodology and how membranes get attached to fences, and having a family member being a fence installer, it was probably, or maybe an unrealistic expectation for that to be achieved. There may be, because of the nature of the swinging mechanism of the gate, there may be 1 inch to 2 inches, or 1 inch for swinging purposes.
So there's one section of fence that is permanently affixed, and so the panel is, the sound attenuation panel is on that, and then there are, a fence post, and then the gate fence post, so sometimes there's just not possible to have a continuous run.
It may be 1 inch. Our goal is to get it as tight as possible. The locking mechanism is such that we'll try to tighten it. We don't use these gates on a day-to-day basis, so once they're shut, they stay shut. So, it's not, I just, from a technical perspective, going through this whole process, don't want to get hung up on 1 inch of membrane on a fence.
Okay.
I have a
Comments?
comment. If you added language in accordance with all good construction practices and techniques, that might be useful.
Okay. Any other comments? Mike? I like Alex's suggestion.
Where would you put that language?
Insofar as possible, in accordance with all good construction practices and techniques.
Sort of interested in your question.
What's that?
I'm interested in your question,
I just,
the top of the
We
discussion.
can go back to that if you want.
no, I just
Further.
want to make kind of a question, but it's kind of general to all what I'm being told is grammatic and stuff. On page 3, part 2, paragraph C, at the end of paragraph C, apparently You want to strike applicants shall make available certain relevant records that defined in paragraph 10, review of required records.
I think, and Josh and Maggie can correct me if I'm wrong, I think that the affidavit attesting to the number of employees kind of replaces that, so that rather than, you know, the planning board going and asking for records, if it's an issue in any sort of litigation, that goes through a legal process as opposed to...
That's an affidavit of the number of employees in a previous time period, right?
Yes.
This is relating to the number of employees they have at a present time.
But number
Saying that the
C,
total
number
number of employees shall not exceed 19. So I
Right.
think when the people ask them if they can see records, they want to say, well, you said it was 19 in 2012, you said you wouldn't exceed 19, but you won't show me an employment record so that I can see that you still have just 19.
Yeah, just the title of it, though, is 2012 activity level, doesn't,
But it says additional employees may be hired to replace departing employees, but the total number of employees shall not exceed 19. So I think, you know, that after the first sentence, it's now referring to present situation.
I think present situation could be addressed further on in,
Well, there's just...
The relevant
I'm not
documents.
as significantly concerned with this, other than the fact that why did we make all these little changes? I don't, it would have been easier in my mind, the great period of time that we spent going through this, to leave it alone.
Well,
So-
I don't see,
Mike, so that issue is one issue, and it's...
but I mean, there's
think
these
it's valid.
types of things continuously happen.
But for the substantive content of the application, so that's not there, but if you go back to what it refers to, paragraph 10, subparagraph D, review of required records, that language still requires them to have an updated employee list, and that record needs to be available to the building commissioner or
So
his
you-
designee.
so what you're saying is this may have been a little bit redundant. But
in my-
even at that said, why go through there and strike these things? So you said it was blue twice, that's fine. Why put us through all the trouble of doing this if it's meaningless? Just leave it alone.
Remember, this is the application and not the actual special
For the
permit.
permit, we can certainly put it,
We can do whatever
we
we
can,
want.
I mean, the permit exists today, right?
no,
No, it
no,
doesn't.
Oh, I
there's
mean,
no
oh, I'm
permit.
sorry, the previous permit
The
exists.
previous permit exists.
We can use the previous permit as a template.
But
That's my point.
certainly, whatever they explain, if we go with it and decide to issue a permit, we can do what they want, or if we decide not to go with it, we can not do what they want.
We can emulate the previous permit.
It's exactly right.
Okay. It just, it seems, some of my comments are probably like, what's the big deal? But that's exactly my point.
I understand.
What's the big deal?
Yeah, got
Why are
it.
you striking these things? Why? It seemed, you know, it seemed when the first go through, one thing we were trying to do is saying, how can this be enforced? How can we protect the neighbors? How can we do this? And some of the things were like being able to, and we didn't, and we got, I remember we hashed this out. We're not gonna allow people to just walk up and say, let me see your records. But we were gonna allow the public, through the building commissioner, to request things. And when we're striking these things, it seems like almost like.
We may still do that.
Yeah, and I realize that, but it just,
It's a reasonable question. Is everybody okay with Alex's recommendation on the construction best practice language? As applicant is okay with that? Okay. Right, Tim, what's the next one?
The next one, similar, in subparagraph F, second paragraph, insofar as possible, composting shall be reasonably odor-free and conducted in a reasonably quiet, efficient manner. And again, that insofar as possible is an addition.
Do you want to comment on that?
page again, I'm
Applicant.
sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's on
I've been
page
there, I
9.
just can't
It's-
read
it's-
mine.
it's-
What page?
It's page 9, subparagraph F, operations, second paragraph of that section.
so this is referring to the compost pile at 217 and 237, which we sit right next door to a horse barn who, they have their own compost and horse manure pile. And we just know from our experience that sometimes when you go into the pile and move it, there is an odor from our pile and/or from the manure pile. So we try to keep it as odor-free as possible, but just knowing that sometimes there is just the very nature of what it is.
But it
And it
could,
just is kind of, I've found that odor-free is very subjective.
So is insofar as possible.
it could be conducted in a reasonably quiet.
Insofar as possible is
manner.
very subjective. Subjective on subjective.
I would think we would do the same thing in accordance with,
All
with,
good composting practices.
well, be reasonably odor-free in accordance with applicable composting, good applicable composting practices.
I suppose. In this particular case, I thought the word reasonably took care of this. And I think insofar as possible is just redundant. I think reasonably handles it. Reasonably is, if I'm correct, I think reasonably is a term of law that can be relied upon.
I think that you're right. I think that it is redundant. And certainly, saying insofar as possible, it shall be conducted in a reasonably quiet, efficient manner is, I mean, that is not insofar as possible. It is possible to conduct composting in a reasonably quiet, efficient manner. So the insofar as possible,
It
if
actually
it were to
minimizes the
stay
reason-
in,
it hurts
could
the
only
reasonability.
refer to odor.
It just, besides the fence, it's like, you were where you wanted to be. Why?
Yeah, I mean, the fence I get because of the construction practices, and if the word reasonable was there, I probably would have, I would have had a problem with the word reasonable there because of the fact that the noise was such a huge part of the application. I would prefer that the insofar as possible be stricken on this one.
Well, I'd agree.
Next one, Tim.
This is on, I'm looking at the red line, page 15, under subsection O, rules. This is subparagraphs 2 and 3, slash the new subparagraph 2, a sort of merging alteration of 2 and 3 regarding idling bobcats, whether unattended or attended.
Well, of course, what's an attended bobcat is the question. It
Is it?
doesn't necessarily have to be someone with a bobcat in the driver's seat. It can be a bobcat standing by, waiting to,
I'd like to hear from the applicant on this one about why this is being asked for.
When I looked at that, I was the one who raised the question there. I just viewed it as whether it was attended or not attended wasn't really the issue at hand, it was the noise. And the idling law, to me, had precedent over whether a truck is parked or unattended, or a bobcat is running and unattended. That's how I looked at it.
So you're saying that that stricken clause is redundant with
Yes.
16A, Chapter 90?
Correct.
I've never seen the law.
I haven't either, and the law could change, and I think we don't want the special permit to change in this particular case.
And the law is probably pretty, I mean, I don't
idling
know
law-
what the law says. Maybe it's a great law. We could, if it's a great law, we could say in accordance with the law as it currently exists, but we'd have to take a look at the law to,
So you don't have an
Further
issue
that.
with the bobcats not running? You're just trying to not be redundant here.
Correct.
In this particular case, I think redundance is preferred.
Yeah, I do too. I would prefer to just keep it as it was.
Okay, next.
The next one is just a reference error on page 17. Under Q, snow and ice removal plan, affidavit attesting the level of snow and ice removal activities, attaches Exhibit C, it's actually Exhibit F. We all set with that?
That one we don't have to talk about, I don't think.
The next one on page 20 of the red line, under subparagraph E, on-site traffic loading deliveries, subparagraph 1, required log, there's a deletion of and members of the public in the sentence that continues, shall be kept on-site in the sales office for review by the building commissioner or his designee, the Board of Appeals, or the planning board as requested through the building commissioner or designee. So there's the issue of the deletion, and then also sort of if the deletion is okay, how that affects the rest of that sentence.
What?
We would have to add an and,
Yeah.
potentially.
Well, so what I mean is that the original language, as I interpret it, means shall be kept on site in the sales office for review by the building commissioner or his designee, the Board of Appeals, the planning board, and then as requested, the building commissioner or designee refers to members of the public. So it's like the question of whether the planning board can go to the sales office and say, I want your records, or does the planning board have to go to the building commissioner and say, we want the records, and then the building commissioner goes. And then that question also, does that apply to the Board of Appeals as well?
Okay, I understand what you're
It
saying.
clearly, they deleted a portion, but not all. It's members of the public as requested by the building inspector was the phrase that they wanted to delete, but they didn't delete the whole thing.
Or maybe that's not the case, I don't know.
No, my opinion was just the public. And that's what it was originally, actually. The public creeped back in there, it wasn't a change. This was going,
Public didn't creep back there.
if you go back to the permit that was issued, the public component was not there.
I thought we had a long discussion
Yeah.
We
that,
had a long discussion about that.
What does the permit say?
Public was not on the list.
well, this is the. So basically what this allows is anytime any member of the public has a question, all they have to do is call the building inspector. And then the building, as you know, the building inspector has to follow up with every phone call, or else then he is charged with non-enforcement. So this, as history has proven, we are fearful that we're going to have to be pulling all these records upon every single request of anybody at any time.
It's just a log, isn't it? What,
It's just the log.
it's just the log that you would have to, having, you know, the information about the delivery at a time. What does the permit say, Tim?
I don't have the permit on me.
Wasn't this the permit?
None of this language comes from the permit,
It all comes from
It
the
all comes from
permit.
the permit,
so
so it's gonna
they're saying, Tim has told us he had to strike this, but
You'll find it, hold on.
I know it was in the permit, but when we had our discussion, it was a lengthy discussion about how much public access do our personal business records
I
have.
agree with you.
That's why the
in
building
what-
inspector
right,
was put in.
Right. What
Correct.
we decided was no, but like, I think I made the comment about 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
We decided, no, the public can't walk up to you and say, let me
Correct.
see your records.
Right.
That's what the lengthy discussion was over. But we said, if the public wants to get in touch with the building inspector and say, I wish you'd go see their records because there's been trucks coming in and out of there at 3 o'clock in the morning for the past week and a half.
Yeah,
Because what's the point of the planning board? In a sense, the zoning board of appeals, I don't know where these people live. I'm not going to be witness to what's going on there, so I'm not going to make too many requests of the building commissioner. But the people that may make a request of the building commissioner are the people that live beside you.
Yeah, I mean, that language is in there, and members of the public, as requested to the building commissioner or designee.
It's just that,
Referring to members of the public.
Right.
But the as
Yes.
clause, and
And the
we
commas
should make it
and-
clear that it doesn't apply to the planning board or the board of
So is the comma in the right place here?
Appeals.
No, I think the
Yes.
I think the sentence reads that the zoning board of appeals, the planning board, and the public have to request the records through the building commissioner.
No, I don't think the board of appeals and the planning board do.
Maybe,
Well, I mean, that's what it may say, but it
Yeah.
shouldn't say that. It should say the public have to go through the building
Yeah.
commissioner.
I like a lot of things in business. I see nothing wrong with one point of contact, and if that's the building commissioner, that's fine. Even if he does it for the building, in my,
Even if we do it for everyone?
yeah, what difference make? We trust the
Well, because
building
of
commissioner.
course, because of course, the Board of Appeals in a proceeding where they say, we want you to produce these records,
So to make it clear, we could say, for review by the building commissioner or his designee, semicolon, the Board of Appeals, semicolon,
right,
the
exactly.
planning board, semicolon, and members of the public as requested through the building commissioner or designee, period. Would you be comfortable with that?
I am.
Okay,
Fine.
great.
What they-
That is page
Okay,
20 of the red line. For the public service announcement, I'd like to remind everybody that I was an English major. All right, Tim, what's next?
We need more English majors in the planning business. The next one is on page 24, under D, review of required records. So there's an insertion and a deletion. The following records shall be kept in the sales office and shall be made available, here's the insertion, with an appropriate amount of notice for inspection by the building commissioner and/or his designee at the building commissioner's request. And there's the deletion is the term "and copying" for inspection and copying by the building commissioner. So it's basically shall be made available with appropriate amount of notice, and then only for inspection, not for copying by the building inspector.
So, let's hear from
You're on page 24?
24 of the red
24 of the
line.
red line, yeah.
23 of the,
It's towards the bottom.
The way I interpret that is that if the building inspector shows up and I'm in the middle of a task or doing something, out of no disrespect to the building inspector, I don't want him to drop immediately what I'm doing to be able to service his needs if I'm with a client, or I'm serving the public, or I'm doing something for the town. So ample notice might be something that would be helpful to us, just rather than coming in and cold calling us.
And what about the copying?
Maggie may have some thought on that.
I just think that, I don't think it's necessary. If he's coming to inspect, he can just sign off on it. Why is there a need to copy? I don't think that, really any other business in town has their, employee records or products. I mean, I don't think like Bent's Coffee Shop shows how many cups of coffee they sell a day or a year. So I just don't think it's necessary or relevant to copy it if the building inspector just signs off on it. Why does it need to float around town hall?
Okay, comments, questions?
well, what's appropriate is, 6 months or some.
That's too many.
I mean, appropriate is totally
Yeah,
subjective.
we have to
It
specify, I agree.
doesn't, and if the building inspector needs record, I mean, if he says, this is, you're in non-compliance, I want a copy of this record, being able to say, no, sorry, can't have it, is not going to advance matters.
I'm back to the point I seem to keep rehashing. Why you get a permit that you wanted, and why you come back here with these seemingly petty things that could effectively slow down. I mean, if there's going to be a multitude of things like this, like we skipped over a whole paragraph that's being hashed out, if that's what people really want, then I think my thought, as far as the amendment has changed, maybe it needs to be a new permit. I don't
It
see.
is a new permit, just to clarify. I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we change that on the
In-
record, that it is a new permit. But I know what you're saying. Do you have anything, April?
I mean,
I mean, I don't object to a given notice. I think that's a reasonable request. I think we need to, if we're going to agree to that, we have to define what a reasonable amount of notice is. I think the copying, I think that could be an important point. I wasn't here for the first round, and I would kind of defer to you guys on how you want to manage that. I think, to Mike's point, relitigating all of this in the court of public opinion here is probably not a smart way to proceed.
we spent somewhere between a year and a year and a
Yeah,
half
that's
on
what I
this.
mean.
I mean, when you came back and we said, should you pay another fee? No, you shouldn't pay another fee because it wasn't your fault. But I don't think that's, on the other side, I don't think that in turn gives you the opportunity to make all kind of edits. You shouldn't, I mean, you got what you wanted. Why are you messing with it?
Well,
Well, we didn't get what
We
we
didn't
wanted.
get what we wanted. You guys
Well,
got what
everybody-
you wanted.
If you got the opportunity to conduct your business, then everybody got what they wanted, hopefully. That's our goal, to have a good deal. But to re-edit it and hack it for little reasons, for unknown reasons, it's just like, it's only gonna you're only throwing a monkey wrench in the whole process, in my mind.
it seems to me that there is, applicants don't get along well with the building commissioner. And, we recognize that fact, but when we did this section initially, we spent some time with it. And I just don't see any reason to change it, what we did before. And, but it being in the application doesn't mean, the permit doesn't have to say what's in the application. The permit can say,
I think we're
what's
discussing
in
the application right now.
original permit. And from what we've discussed, except for the fence, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, it sounds like it's going to, we haven't heard from people in opposition, but if we were to issue it, it sort of sounds like we'd be issuing the same permit with some corrections. I mean, we would take out the planning board will hear all appeals. You'd agree with that?
Well, here's my whole thought process. The fence moving, I've seen multiple times people come back, different colored fences, not necessarily relative. We said these are de minimis changes. I agree with that. But these things strike me as, well, that's not that important. Well, like I say to people all the time, why'd you say that? Oh, no reason. There's always a reason. If you did something, if you changed something, if you put a word there, if you moved a word, there's a reason you did it. And you're trying to effectively accomplish something. And we spent a year and a half accomplishing something. And I don't want to spend another 6 months trying to accomplish it because of crossing out paragraphs, changing words. If I want to be honest with myself, this is going to take a long time to go through again then. If I just want to accept it, then I guess I could do that. But why did you change it? We were at a point that I thought people were content with.
I want to clarify something I think that you just said, but I'm not sure it's what you meant. The sort of additions to language that I've been referencing tonight were not in an effort to change the application. They were an effort to potentially put language on the table that we would incorporate into a permit if it is issued.
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure. The application is.
No, the application
The application is done. We're not changing the application.
The
again.
application, the amended application does ask for a few changes, but Tim has listed them on one hand. There are 5 changes? How many?
7.
Seven.
And I mean,
Two hands.
this large, and I forgot to highlight this, and that's literally why I skipped it. This large paragraph in the preceding paragraph under formal procedure complaints to the building commissioner. This really, a lot of this is either a restatement of procedures that are laid out in 40A, and also sort of the creation of a kind of new appeals process in front of the planning board. And I think the purpose behind deleting that is to just keep it nice and easy. You go to the building commissioner, you go to the Board of Appeals, you go to the next highest court, you know, rather than kind of creating a new process with the planning board as an intermediary.
I thought we had put that in there as a means of getting someplace quick if there were significant complaints, but, I mean, I don't want to rehash the last year and a half.
All right, so it seems like we're gonna, just to try to move this forward, it seems like the board is not inclined to make this change. So we'll,
On the copying or the appointment?
I got the impression that it was both.
So the notice, we also don't,
What does the original say? What does the permit say?
The following records shall be kept in the sales office and shall be made available for inspection and copying by the building commissioner and/or his designee at the building commissioner's request.
Okay, that implies some time for compliance, but that's probably fine. What else does it say?
What do you mean, what else does it say?
Okay, it just says the
all
record
it says.
shall be,
Kept in the
if you
sales
say the
office.
record shall be updated on applicable, I don't understand that. I mean, if you have employees in March, you wait until spring to update your records? I don't get it.
Well, basically, we have 3 seasons.
What?
We have 3 seasons.
There are 4 seasons, aren't there?
Thayer Nursery has 3 seasons.
You have winter, you have fall, you have spring, and you have summer.
Right.
Which one don't you
But
have?
primarily, we don't have a busy winter. Winter is not a very
But
busy
you do
winter.
do plowing, so
Yes, yes, but it's not busy as the other. That's a minor component. So we may, we just have set seasons. And
Understood.
so our whole industry is seasonally
I think what you're
based.
hearing from this board is, can you live with what you've got on that language? Because clearly, the picking at it is not making people very,
I mean, we just got to a point that makes it all clear. You said seasonal. It doesn't say in there. You have to explain to us what seasonal is in the nursery business. It ain't explained in there. We're just creating more. All right, we're gonna have to rehash through that. We're gonna have to have a lengthier explanation. But it's going down a road that's like, well, we better start from scratch.
well,
If this is what you want, we better start from
I
scratch.
think you're right. I think it creates even just minor changes where I understand where the applicant is coming from, saying, well, if it read this way, it would be a little bit easier for us and it would be a little clearer for everyone, but it's a domino effect, right? And so every minor adjustment impacts something else, which impacts something else. And I guess from my perspective, I would like to know just what you said. Are you satisfied with the prior permit? Or is it worth it to you to reopen this for another
Through the whole process.
prolonged process?
I mean, me personally, I think there's, if out of the 7 or 8 items that Tim had, if we split that in half and 4, like, it's kind of important to me. I don't think it's a deal breaker for the building inspector to give ample time. If you said he has X amount of time to do an inspection, I think that's a reasonable request, and I can hear that. The seasonality of the season, I would go with what you're proposing. The other thing, I would go with what you're proposing, but it's kind of important to me as, in order to give him the best service that I could, too, in the due diligence, then I think ample time, if it was just said 24 hours.
Well, that's
I mean,
what
I don't know.
We'd have to have the building inspector here. I don't know if the building inspector's required in
Yeah.
a commercial business in Milton to give them notice. He can, I would assume he can walk into the building and say, I'd like to inspect your back room. I think that I've heard that there's a structural deficiency. I want to look at it right now.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
almost to protect you as well.
No, I'm okay with that, but it's the preparation and the documentation.
Well,
That-
that's all reasonable. If he says, I want.
Yeah, I can come back in an hour, yeah.
I can't give you right now. I'm standing here with.
Yeah, as long as there's an understanding, I'm okay with that, but it's just that with our experiences, we haven't had that type of relationship, so.
If I can, I don't want to use the term devil's advocate, but,
You just did too.
I'm sorry. I'm trying that sort of idea. Records shall be updated on a regular basis as relevant information is received or changed was the language in the special permit, which you might not agree with applicable seasonal basis, but I mean, this is an opportunity to maybe clear up what regular basis means. Which is something that can be.
I'm fine with regular
Yeah.
basis.
People pay their bills
Yeah,
monthly.
yeah, just,
Most businesses pay their bills monthly.
That's
You
okay.
couldn't expect weekly, then we give you records daily.
That's
weekly.
perfectly fine, that's not a
Monthly.
deal breaker. I don't want, we're going down the wrong path here.
But as you know, though, words are extremely important, and we're just trying to make sure and protect ourselves moving forward. Every single word is very important.
Well, I think on the first three, we acknowledged that for
Yeah,
sure. I
understood.
think we're having a harder time with these
Yeah.
last few little.
We're almost over the hurdle, so we can live with the seasonality that was in the permit.
Let's hear from the public, and then we'll come
Good.
back and have a further conversation. So if you could step back, we will hear from the public. Our usual rules apply. Please wait to be recognized and address the board, not the applicant. Mr. Johanning, you are recognized.
I'm Phil Johanning, 23 Parkwood Drive. I understand what you said about vetting this thing, but I guess I had a lot of trouble with the process. There was a special permit prepared, and then the applicant was asked to come to the table and go through the application and accept or reject various pieces, but the public was not allowed to speak. And it seems to me that the way it should work is the applicant presents his application, the public speaks, the board deliberates on its own, not with the applicants. And so my concern about the whole process in the past was that the board was more focused on the success of the business than it was on protecting the neighborhood. I heard very little during the deliberation process about protection of the neighbors. And if you want to understand what is required by state law, you have to realize that Chapter 40A, Section 9 requires that the activities that the applicant is requesting must be in harmony with the neighborhood. And I don't think that, let's say, manure that might have an odor is in harmony with the neighborhood. I just don't see that. The board did not consider the neighbors in most things, like hours of operation.
Mr. Johanning, I'm just going to interrupt you for a minute. We're not here to rehash.
This is a
the
public
original
meeting.
special per- It is
This is a public
hearing.
meeting, and I'm
It's a public
speaking.
hearing,
And I'm
and I
not
have the
debating
right-
with you. I'm speaking.
I am the chair of this board, and I'm going to make a comment.
Okay.
We are here tonight to talk about a specific application in front of us. We're not here to rehash the former special permit application. So you can speak towards this process, you can speak towards the application in front of us, which does involve things like hours of operation, but I don't think it's relevant to bring up the past special permit process.
And I do, because that is what resulted in the special permit that we have.
That's
That
not true,
hearing-
because the special permit that's not on the table tonight. We're here to talk about a new special permit. And you're out of order if you talk about the old special permit process. So if you have comments on this special permit, we will hear them.
Okay. I think that the whole orientation of this special permit process needs to be ensuring harmony with the neighborhood. Hours of operation need to be in harmony. And so, starting operation at 7 o'clock in the morning, for instance, in my opinion, particularly on the weekends, is not in harmony. Operating loud, noisy equipment on a Sunday is not in harmony. And this is a requirement of state law. And I don't mind going back to land court and dragging all of these issues out if the board does not consider them important enough to go through now. So, there's been substantial testimony there have been rulings of the ZBA, there have been court decisions, there's been testimony before this board that harmony with the intended operation does not exist. The town even submitted a memo to Judge Wilson in Norfolk Superior Court that explains why Thayer Nursery's commercial uses are not in harmony with the surrounding residential neighborhood. Judge Wilson agreed and granted a preliminary injunction precluding those uses. And so even the town went and said these uses are not in harmony with the neighborhood. The bylaw, the town bylaws state that a special permit can only be issued if the applicant can show that the proposed use will not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and without substantially derogating from the intent and purpose of the bylaws. So that's a really important consideration. The board has never shown that the protections required by the bylaw amendment are sufficient to protect the neighbors in light of the intensive industrial use of the small site in a residential neighborhood. The bylaw amendment shifts the responsibility to the planning board to ensure adequate protections are in place. So there's talk about a sound attenuating fence, but it was never shown that the sound attenuating fence actually protects us in accordance with the requirements of the CMR. There can only be a 10 decibel increase in the sound level, or you're out of compliance with the CMRs. And no one has shown that that sound attenuating fence is going to work. And that's your requirement. That's my understanding. The other thing is that it's interesting to me in this discussion of the fence and the movement of the fence that the fence wasn't moved toward Thayer Nursery. Instead, it was moved toward the Tevens. And I can't, if you want to preserve the trees, that's great. But why not move the fence toward Thayer Nursery? Why is it automatically moved toward the abutter? I'm not sure I understand that. And as an abutter to the Tevens and to Thayer Nursery, I think I'm affected when the fence is moved. Period, end of story. I think also that it has to be, it's actually a requirement in my mind that whatever restrictions are put in place by this board under the special permit have to be consistent with the requirements of the Zoning Board of Appeals in their special permit, because otherwise you create an unenforceable nightmare. Somebody says, oh, the Bobcat was running at 7 a.m., and somebody says, well, that's a landscaping Bobcat, that's not that puts the neighbors in a ridiculous position. Every time we say one thing, it turns out that the Bobcat was something else. I think it's a mistake for there not to be complete consistency between one special permit and the other. It was interesting to me that Alex wrote a letter to the Hillside Neighborhood Association, and in the letter he said, not only does the proposed new zoning, and he was talking about non-conforming business, the non-conforming business article, not only does the proposed new zoning allow extremely large, overly dense developments, but it does not impose any workable standards. The important word is workable standards, to ensure that each new business development would be appropriate for its particular site, The sponsors seem to take the position that such matters are details best left to the planning board, and that the planning board will only issue special permits which protect residents and their neighborhoods. Such a position is at odds with reality. Some special permits are good, others are not. the mere possibility that a permit will be adequately protective of residents and their interests is not a good reason to dispense with specific zoning standards which ensure that residents and neighborhoods are protected. These residents and neighborhoods should not have to depend on the mercy of the planning board. And I find that that's the position that we're in on Parkwood Drive and Forest Street. I think it's important to recognize some things that have occurred that actually help us to build a case that show that these business uses are not consistent or not harmonious with the neighborhood. One is property taxes. Our property taxes, John and my property taxes. We asked the town for an abatement because of the industrial use behind our home. Our application was rejected. We went to the appellate tax board, we got a reduction. We went back to the town the next year, they gave us a reduction because of the industrial use. And then the appellate tax board gave us a larger abatement. And so the point is that if these uses are harmonious, why did the appellate tax board and why did the town feel that our property value was being impacted by these uses? I mean, if they were completely consistent, it seems to me that consistent with the use or consistent with the neighborhood and the way all of the neighbors use their property, why would that cause our property value to be diminished? And the point is that it's not harmonious. The Zoning Board of Appeals ruled in 2002 that the level of activity at Thayer harmed the surrounding neighborhood and they imposed additional conditions. We discussed this at the last meeting, and Maggie stated that those additional conditions were never implemented because they felt that the 2002 decision did not apply to them, which I don't believe is accurate, in that it was never rescinded and never appealed. The ruling of the ZBA is the ruling of the ZBA. It's the law of the land. And the ZBA felt that the activities at Thayer Nursery adversely impacted the neighborhood, and they put in a list of things that had to be done, and they were never done. So it seems to me obvious that if the ZBA felt that they were inconsistent, not harmonious, and none of the conditions were met, then they're still not harmonious. And we're talking about the current level, which, you know, I don't know. I think another thing that I'm concerned about is this affidavit that establishes the 2012 baseline. I don't think an affidavit is really sufficient, diving to a sufficient depth on validating those levels of activity. I think an affidavit can be almost anything. I mean, you can back into it. You can say, what am I doing today? That's what I'll put was 2012. And you've done nothing as a board to really ascertain that those were the levels. I think finally, or almost finally, Pam Lepori proposed, Pam Lepori and I proposed a different layout. And the comments that happened as a result of that proposal, Alex stated that he had given a lot of thought to the layout that was proposed by the applicants, and he had decided that was the best possible layout. But there was no discussion of that, and so the public really didn't have the opportunity to talk about the pros and cons of the layout. But there were some comments made, and one of them was that Josh indicated that he had agreements with neighbors on Harlan Street that would preclude him from moving landscaping operations to 217 Hillside Street. Again, it's an indication that it's not harmonious. If certain neighbors went to him and asked for a commitment that those operations would not be moved to that site, then there must be something wrong with them. Additionally, Pam and I suggested that the trucks would be parked in customer parking during the nighttime hours. And Donna Swanson said, oh, but I think the trucks should stay where they are. I like them better like that. The nursery looks so lovely. Why would we want trucks parked in the customer parking areas? Okay, is that harmonious? I think not. If they're parked near me or they're parked near Pam Lepori, that's okay. But if they're parked in customer parking, then there's a problem. That's not harmonious. Additionally, Robert Mussey talked about the disturbance that he would endure if the operations of the nursery were put at the corner of Hillside and Forest. And he said, but it'll be so close to my house. And there was a discussion about whether it would be closer to Pam Lepori's house or closer to Robert Mussey's house. Again, it's an indication that these uses are not harmonious. I think the planning board really has to consider all of these issues again, and to the extent that they cannot be, sometimes I'm sick and I stay home from work, and at 7 a.m. or even before, I hear noise coming from Thayer Nursery. I don't think that you would like that, Mike or Alex. You wouldn't like that at all, but it's okay for me. The town talks about new noise ordinances for construction projects. I remember Brian Walsh, the former town moderator, coming here and talking about his concerns about construction on the Pleasant Street project starting before 8 o'clock. That's a temporary project. It's going to end. I have something every day, So I think I've belabored the point, but it is not harmonious. And I think you need to struggle with protections of the neighbors that will bring it into harmony. And I think that involves hours of operation. It involves noise still. And it involves your proving that those protections, that sound attenuating fence, will actually mitigate the noise for us. It has to do with smells. It has to do with dust. It has to do with a lot of things. And I don't think there's an adequate plan or that the board has shown that we're being protected. Again, the zoning bylaws do not protect commercial businesses in a residential neighborhood. Only the residents are protected. Only the residents receive protections. And so the planning board must ensure that the residents are protected. I also wanted to read the email that I sent about my attorney's comment last week that in light of Joe Prondak's letter of the 25th of May, the applicants did not have clean hands, and Cheryl Tagayas said, I don't understand why we're talking about that. So I said, Tim, I asked my attorney, Matthew Dunn, for any information that he had related to the status of the 2001 ZBA decision related to Thayer Nursery. He sent me the following. Below, please find some language that was included in one of the motions in a private nuisance case that discusses how the ZBA decisions are binding unless or until they are annulled by the land or superior court. Furthermore, neither 2001 decision nor other ZBA zoning enforcement decisions involving Thayer Nursery have ever been stayed, enjoined, or reversed. Without ever obtaining a stay of enforcement or a reversal of the land or superior courts, those decisions, including the 2001 decision, remain in full force and effect and establish the scope of permissible uses and activities on the subject property that Thayer Nursery must abide by. And then he cites some cases. The defendants acknowledge the applicability of this premise in the context of zoning appeals brought under Massachusetts General Law 40A, Chapter 40A, Section 17, as is evidenced by their unsuccessful efforts to stay enforcement of the ZBA's decision dated September 26, 2013, in another zoning appeal that they commenced in this court on October 10th, he means the Superior Court, 2013. See decision of the Honorable Brian Davis dated October 29, 2013, in the matter Oldfield et al. Versus Joe Henning et al. Civil action, blah, blah, blah. And I asked him, would you need a copy of Judge Davis's decision, or is the above adequate? I would appreciate it if you would forward this note to the planning board members or print it and hand it to them. With respect to Member Cheryl Tagayas' question about why we would spend time discussing Mr. Prondak's letter of 25 May 2016, I believe that the answer is clear. How could the planning board consider granting zoning relief to a party in exchange for conditions that would protect neighbors from the impact of their new activities if the applicant cannot abide by existing restrictions handed down by the Zoning Board of Appeals in 2001? It actually should be 2002. In Mr. Prondak's letter, Maggie admitted to operating bobcats outside of the permitted hours of operation. It wasn't as if someone called the town and no one knew whether it was Thayer or someone else. Maggie admitted that Thayer Nursery routinely operated bobcats before 8 a.m. and after 6 p.m. She stated that the restrictions imposed by the ZBA did not pertain to her. The language from my attorney above shows that the restrictions did apply. Her misunderstanding based on comments from an unnamed attorney don't absolve Thayer Nursery, particularly in the eyes of the neighbors, including Cole, Tevens, Lepori, who fought for the 2001 ZBA decision. While Josh's comments about the Cole family swimming pool contractor were absolutely true, this is the first time ever that the Cole family, with 3 teenage sons and 1 young daughter, has ever created any type of disturbance in our neighborhood. The total construction time was less than 2 weeks. The Cole family and the Tevens family, 1 teenage son and 2 now-grown daughters, are very close to perfect neighbors. I would say that John and I fall in the same category, as does the Quinn family. Thayer, on the other hand, creates a disturbance of some kind or another almost every single day of the year, particularly in the best weather, frequently in the early mornings, in the evenings, and especially on weekends. Last Saturday, 4 June, was a perfect summer day. We could not enjoy our pool because of the constant noise from the bobcats at Thayer. We chose to leave our home for the day. Would that show compatibility with our residential neighborhood? The new special permit has not yet taken effect even. It is a challenge to see how the existing activity at Thayer Nursery could possibly be compatible with the residential character of our neighborhood. Thayer has yet made no attempt to show that its expanded uses are in harmony as required by Mass General Law. If its current uses are not in harmony, how could any type of expanded use be in harmony? Finally, one has to realize that the Thayer site at 270 Hillside Street is around 5 acres. There are 2 homes, large gravel driveways, a parking lot, a barn, a showroom, and a large wood storage facility with a repair shop. One may say that Thayer is farming the site with their constant activity. Look at the reality. The site isn't that large. The 2 contempt actions by the town since Judge Wilson's cease and desist order, the present letter from Mr. Prondak, and the noise in my backyard last Saturday cast some doubt regarding whether the prohibited activities ever totally stopped. Who will protect the character of our neighborhood as required by the 2014-2016 bylaw amendment? Who will enforce the rules once they are made? We know that is the charge of the planning board. If this special permit will succeed a challenge, we know that the charge must be met. These are the issues presented to the planning board by Mr. Prondak's letter. They must be very seriously considered.
John, I'm asked to wrap up. We've been over 20 minutes here, so to the extent you can wrap
That's
up
okay.
quickly, I'd appreciate it.
I listened to the applicant, so I guess I ask you to listen to me. I guess I'm basically finished, but I think the last thing I want to say is I do think you need to look at the eligibility of the applicants. I don't think that saying that Thayer Nursery Corporation is a successor to Robert and Margaret Oldfield is correct. The 1967 special permit and the 1987 amendment precluded the permit from going to a non-human person. And so Thayer Nursery Corporation cannot be a successor in interest because it is not a human person. So I think before we end up in court again over eligibility, you need to take a careful look at that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to this application from the public? Okay. Anything else from the applicant? Okay. What is the board's pleasure beyond to go forward at this point?
I would say this. We have received an amended application tonight, which we're ready to go with, and we've gone through the amended application. We've heard from the applicant and Mr. Joe Henning. We still have to give the public the opportunity to take this amended application into consideration and to comment on it if they want to. In other words, the public coming tonight may have thought that we were going to discuss the original application. We have come up with an amended application, and or an amended application is now before us. It seems only fair that we have to continue the hearing until the next time.
We don't have a final amended application.
We have the application,
Okay,
but,
all right.
the public hasn't had an adequate opportunity. I mean, there may be members of the public who hear about this tomorrow, the next day. The amended application basically is being presented to the public for the first time today. Mr. Joe Henning happened to be here. Perhaps he received it beforehand. But there may be other people in the public who haven't heard about it and want to say something. So that's my view, is that it's simple due process. You have to give people a reasonable opportunity to be able to speak, and notice is important.
So, perhaps despite my better judgment, I'm going to suggest that raises a level of concern for me with our original decision tonight. If we feel strongly that the public needs to be able to comment beyond this point because it's a new application effectively, or a significantly modified application, it raises my concern about notice. We discussed earlier that we didn't believe we needed to have a whole new application, a whole new advertising period, but your comments make me reconsider that, to be honest with you.
Can't we just leave that open? I mean, it's.
We can leave it open. My concern is,
We
people are watching it on television or sitting right here.
Here's where I'm going, Brian. If we take public comment, and the public comment does become significant, then I follow where you're going. If we leave it open to public comment, and the public comment is rehash of the same public comment or insignificant, then we'll keep moving.
So my feeling is that this was such a controversial project with so much due diligence conducted and so many meetings that people attended. We had a new application last week, and I believe we only had the one comment. Is that correct? We had one person speak on it, Mr. Joe Henning's representative. No one else was here. Tonight, again, after getting this, which was significantly different than I think what the board would have expected, or maybe even the public would have expected, we still only got one abutter here, and it's been noticed twice. Thoroughly talked about for years. I would think that if there was concern about issuing a new permit, that people would have come to the last two meetings with proper notice. So my feeling is, I mean, if this board is prepared to move forward with a special permit that was almost identical to the last issued, I would be comfortable rendering a decision tonight. I don't think we heard anything new here. I think the fence issue, not being able to close it so that it's completely flush, makes sense to make that adjustment. A couple other minor adjustments, but other than that, it's.
So the next step would be to
Well, actually,
re-author a new special permit.
Right. Well, we would
which in
essentially-
effect could be
A duplicate of the
extremely
prior.
similar.
Right, with a few minor adjustments.
Right.
I mean, I just don't see, I can't imagine that we're
I'm
gonna make.
inclined to agree with April, to be honest with you. If we're not gonna send out a whole new advertisement, and we're not gonna basically treat this as a brand-new application, I'm inclined to agree that I think we've heard what we're gonna hear.
And I want to say, Alex, what you just said, I would normally completely agree with in any other circumstance, probably, other than this one, because it's been discussed for 2 years. And I feel like if there was going to be a significant outcry, or there's going to be people that were interested, that we would see them.
Perhaps we can compromise here. We're not gonna vote tonight because we don't have an application, we don't have a permit in front of us to vote on. So, to the extent that we're not gonna vote tonight, I don't see any harm in leaving the public hearing open, to Mike's suggestion. At the same time, preparing a draft permit that we can review and perhaps vote on at the next meeting. Does that seem like a good solution? That may have been exactly what you were suggesting.
Well, that was, I was
Heading there?
thinking that was in order, but there's no reason that you couldn't put another notice in the Milton Times, because it is a continued hearing, so you don't need it. But the point I make is this. Notice is often what trips people up. Procedural things are, courts love to get rid of a case on procedure because it's easier. And the procedure of receiving an amended application, which is significantly different from the application, and it may be right down the line of the original permit, which it is. But still, it's a very different application, and letting people, and there may be no one. I mean, the number of people who commented on that original proceeding may decide that they don't want to re-comment when what's being asked for is exactly what was issued before. But they've got to be given the chance to do that, and since we don't have anything to sign,
I agree.
it makes a lot of sense to continue the hearing, and with the understanding that if nothing big comes up next time, that we're probably going to take a vote, and since we have already issued the particular permit once, it might seem that we might do so again.
So shall we request that staff make a red line of or a draft permit for us to consider at the next?
I think a draft permit would be, and I do think that Mr. Joe Henning raises issues which I'd like to discuss next time, but I don't think I want to discuss them now.
Actually, can we ask our town council, I'm sorry, have you read?
Yes.
I gotta get used to that. Can we ask town council to review the point about the successor and interest, just to be abundantly clear that what we have, that who we're issuing the permit to is actually able to receive it before our next meeting, so that we can
Yes,
have a clear.
I think that makes good sense. We will do that.
Perfect,
Yes.
thank you.
So Bill will take care of that. Can I have a motion to continue the hearing to July 14th at,
Just
sorry?
a reminder, I'm not going to be here the 14th, so if we're going to take up a vote on that. I don't know if I need to be, but
It's up to the applicant. Do you want a full board or do you want 4 members?
Needs to be here.
Well, Cheryl can watch
Cheryl
this.
can vote. Cheryl can watch this. She has not missed it, and she has not
just
missed
have
it.
to
She has time to review it.
So she'll have time to review it. So I leave it up to you. Do you want 5 or do you want 4?
no.
4 is fine.
I haven't been on vacation. I'm just,
So,
We've got a
it sounds like the 14th.
We've got a continued hearing for Kinsale Lane at 7:15. Otherwise, we're free and clear.
Why don't we go for 7:45? Excuse me, 7:30. I don't believe Kinsale will take long.
It'd be quick.
So can I have that motion?
So moved.
Second?
close that door.
All in favor? Thank you.
Check here the 12th.
Okay. The new business. I think we're gonna go in the order of the listing here, except we will go back to the, we've already accomplished the A and R, and we'll go back to the condominium working group. So we will do Carberry, then Adams Street, and then we will talk about our condo group. So let's move on to the Carberry subdivision covenants. So, go ahead, Tim.
These are, oh, I'm sorry, I was about to get up and use the bathroom, but
Sorry.
perfectly fine. These covenants are in your packets. I have the wrong pile here. And Bill can hopefully fill in some gaps, because this is before my time.
We get a call from Mr. Carberry's attorney asking that we take a look at the covenants. All of the covenants have expired. I gave all of the covenants to you, and if you look at the...
Can you back up just a minute? I'm not clear why we're talking about this.
Okay. As Mr. Carberry goes to sell his property, he's trying to make clear title
Okay,
for the property.
okay.
If you go and search,
I think maybe I can,
Let's let,
wait a minute.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
If you go back and search any of the properties that he owns, the titles all come up. These covenants keep popping up as being listed with that property.
okay.
We've taken each one of these properties, looked back at them, and they are, for the most part, covenants for the subdivision that the Carberrys applied for back in the 80s. There were several extensions of those same covenants, and they've all expired. And they expired because of the construction of all the ways and installation of all the municipal services shall be completed in accordance with the application, rules, and regulations of the town of Milton governing the subdivision of the land before, this one's in 1991, unless an extension of time is granted by the Milton Planning Board. Failure to do so, complete shall automatically rescind approval of the plan. And that has happened 4 different times.
Okay.
So there are 4 different covenants that the attorney has just asked the board to just take a formal vote to rescind the covenants.
Go ahead, Mr. Corcoran.
So in 1987,
Introduce yourself, please.
Ned Corcoran, and I am not here other than to add some
Do you represent
explain. I do
the-
not represent the Carberrys, and have not been involved in this.
Okay, I'm gonna hold off then until we go to, just for a moment then.
Okay.
Because I'm not sure if we need any color.
Okay.
Does anybody need any color?
I don't remember seeing these things.
What, I don't understand why the planning board would be voting to rescind covenants. Isn't it a legal
They've
matter?
already expired.
They're in the package tonight.
If it's a legal matter, then it's a legal matter.
They were handed out tonight.
I got a copy here if you want to have a look at it.
The subdivision, these are related to a 50-lot subdivision that was approved in 1987. Subdivision was never acted upon, and it's lapsed. I think the covenants all lapsed as a matter of law, but I understand that in the purchase and sale process for a component of the property at the Carberry estate, that there was a title issue that was flagged that dealt with the fact that these covenants may, because they were not formally rescinded, that maybe there's some legal holdover. And I think that seller's counsel is simply trying to wipe out whatever residual issues might be in place. The subdivision was never built. The DCR acquired 30 acres that were subject to the subdivision in 91. There's nothing there.
But wouldn't it be up to town council to tell us that these covenants have expired?
I mean, the question is, what's the form of rescission that they want. Do we have a form of rescission?
No.
All right, well, I suggest that we vote to rescind and that we, subject to their giving us a satisfactory form of rescission to sign.
That makes sense.
Any issues?
At least,
You-
you
maybe-
know, at
maybe you
least the
understand better than I
lawyer will
don't.
say
I
that.
get it.
I don't understand what grounds the planning board has to rescind covenants on a piece of land.
Well,
Well, they're
because
the-
there
they're-
are covenants.
There are covenants.
They're granted by the planning board.
covenants.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I missed that. I missed the original point then.
They were imposed by the planning board as conditions
Oh,
of
okay.
the subdivision.
April?
And so have we done a check on these to make sure that everything here is accurate?
Yes.
I think this town council should still look at it again to make sure that word by word.
Or we can
That
have,
did expire.
or we can have town council send us a rescission.
Yeah.
I like
Let's
that
have
idea
town
better.
council
I'll have them write the rescission.
write the
Yeah.
rescission based on a review and make sure we belt and suspenders the review.
Okay, that's fine.
So I need a motion, so moved.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That was easy. Okay, we're gonna go on to 556 Adams Street, Novara, patio seating, please. The staff want to give us a quick briefing on this before we call for the applicant.
I think Mrs. McGettrick can.
All right, fine,
Deal
we'll go
with
that
this.
route. Just wanted to make sure, wanted to give you your opportunity to shine, Bill. All right. Miss McCattrick,
Good evening.
good evening.
I am here representing 556 Adams Street, and Vance Welch is also here tonight if there are any questions. This is with regard to a letter which I sent the board last week regarding the form in which patio seating is regulated in the current site plan approval for this restaurant. The current seating condition says that the restaurant can have no more than 20 seats in the patio area. So what the restaurant is coming in tonight to ask you to do, if you are willing, is to modify this condition to say that the number of total seats in the restaurant would not change, 160 seats, which is what determined parking requirements and any number of other requirements that are in the site plan approval, as well as the special permit and the variance and the liquor license, but to allow that flexibility in the amount of seating that can be permitted on the patio. So the total seating will be 160. Bar seating, and this is in the liquor license, can be no more than 30 seats. And if there are more seats out in the patio, there are less seats allowed in the restaurant because you cannot have more than 160 seats. Instead of saying that there's a limit of 20 seats out in the patio. So this, of course, this is something that has evolved now that the restaurant is in operation, and really only within the past few weeks because we had an unusually cold spring, but it is now really warm, and the patio is highly popular and desired by all visitors to the restaurant. So people want to be out in the patio. They actually sit and wait to get patio seats. There is enough room in the patio for more than 20 seats. I think I explained in my letter, the patio, as you may recall, is on two sides. It's surrounded by brick walls that are more than 2 stories high. The front end of the patio is completely, there's no way to enter the patio from the street. This is just a very narrow alleyway between 2 buildings. So it's probably the only patio seating I've ever seen that has such enclosure around it. So it's not that the number of seats is going to intrude more on anybody else, but I think everybody was being cautious when we applied for the license and when you considered this site plan application. Now that the restaurant is operating, I can report that, of course, there was a great deal of interest initially, and it's doing well, but things have tapered off. It's probably 30% less busy than it was during the initial period. And in addition, summertime is a quiet time for restaurants, and particularly in Milton. business drops off in the summer, and one reason to have patio seating is because people like sitting out in a patio in the summer, and they'll still come to the restaurant if they have that type of setting. This one is if you've been there, is very attractive. There are little lights around the top. There's a small fire enclosure at one end that makes it kind of cozy. And it's just something that people very much like. They feel it's a great asset for the town and for the restaurant. So I'd like you to consider whether you may want to modify this restriction and to remove the 20-seat restriction on patio seating while retaining the same control over the number of seats, which is 160 seats in the restaurant.
That 160 seats includes the 30 bar seats you referenced, right? I
Yes,
just
and,
wanted to
and the liquor
make
license
it
is
for you.
particularly explicit. I mean, all of the licenses refer to your site plan approval, but the liquor license is very explicit about the fact that you can have no more than 30 bar seats, and that you can have no more than a total of 160 seats, including the bar seating. And the liquor license also describes the square footage of all the seating where liquor can be served inside the building.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I need to abstain from this conversation. When this project was going through the process, as a private citizen, I consulted the landowner.
Okay.
I was not compensated for my work, but I don't think it would be appropriate for me to participate in this conversation. And I would have told you in advance, but I didn't see the materials until I got here. So I'm just going to go sit in the audience.
Okay. Can I clarify what you're here for tonight?
Yes.
Are you here to get a read of the board, or are you here to ask us to give you an opinion? I'm not sure, are you,
Well,
would
the
you be
request
coming
is-
back to us with a formal site plan modification?
I think we'd be requesting a
Special
minor
permit?
modification of the conditions in the written permit. There's no, I don't know if there's a change in the site plan or not.
There
If it's
wouldn't be. If
necessary,
you-
we
well,
can
there-
make
There
it.
actually could be, because I don't know how many choices.
I'm referring to, there's a
referring to
condition, a
the
specific
condition.
condition at the end of the special permit that says no more than 20 seats in the patio.
Are you asking
So
us
I
to
am
consider
asking-
that a minor modification?
I'm asking you if you would be willing to consider it as a minor modification, since we're not asking for a change in the total number of seats. If you don't want to decide tonight, of course, that's up to the board. If you want more information, we can provide it.
Sure.
How many seats can you put on the patio? 48?
What do you think the maximum would be?
Probably around,
40?
yeah,
40?
probably around 48.
I mean,
That's
that's
a lot
that's
of
a lot of
seats.
seats.
How did you know that?
Well, that's because I've taken a look at the patio.
He was there with his ruler.
48, yeah, 48.
I think it's pretty tough to consider this a minor modification when it abuts a residential neighborhood. That's my opinion. I think you have to give the opportunity for the neighbors to weigh in on this.
Neighbors, and I think, I don't know if there's any safety concerns.
Exactly. I
Maybe
mean,
the fire
I
department.
think this deserves a look with the public.
No, I mean, whatever you think, you feel is the right way to do it. I will say that it's outdoors. It's not an indoor capacity issue, but, whatever the planning board feels is
Yeah, I
the
mean, the
proper
reason,
procedure.
the fact that it's outdoors is what I think we need to give the neighbors an opportunity to opine on. We spent a lot of time talking about trash and impacts and visual impacts and headlights, and this obviously will impact from a noise standpoint the neighborhood, so I think we need to give them an opportunity to weigh in before the planning board can make a decision on this.
And you
So-
probably have to decide how many seats you would limit it to.
I don't remember on the plan if the plan actually showed chairs and tables on the outside area?
The
No?
plan we
Okay.
presented to the
So we
planning
probably
board was
wouldn't
just
need
a
to.
conceptual plan. The site plan doesn't show
Fine.
this. Even the plan we presented for the liquor license was a conceptual plan, but the liquor license allows the flexibility that I'm talking about. But it doesn't allow more than 20 seats in the patio because that was in your special permit. So it stayed with that.
Understood.
So what you want us to do then is to request a specific limit, but we'd ask for more than 20 seats. So you want us to propose a specific number of
You
seats.
should propose a specific number of seats and yes.
Okay. And you'd like some input, you'd like some feedback about potential noise? I suppose that could be based on
I
current
mean, I think
usage.
you're gonna file an application to increase the number of seats by a certain amount, and I think you can probably anticipate the comments, so you should probably be prepared to answer to them to the extent that the board's gonna need to hear testimony to defend any concerns that the public might have.
So would you like us to go to the fire chief and get a letter from the fire chief commenting on whether he thinks there's any public safety issue? I'm just trying to.
I think what we
can
would
figure it
probably
out,
do
but-
is submit any application to the board, to the specific departments to
Are
review.
you asking them for
I'm asking,
a modification of a site plan approval application?
yeah.
Okay.
No, well, not of the application. The application was submitted long ago. This would be a
This would be a
modification of your
modification
permit.
to the
Site plan
to the site plan approval, not of the
Okay.
application.
Of the
But that requires only 1 week's notice. So you could be here on July 14th,
Right.
Right.
which I think you'd like to be.
We would, since
Okay,
it's
well,
summertime.
why don't we do
Hustle
it that way?
around, yep.
I feel like we noticed for 2 weeks for site plan. Did
It's
we?
only required to do one.
Okay.
We do too, but you only required one.
Okay.
I see your hand. We are going to have opportunity for public comment on July 14th. Is there something that you would?
Sat here all night.
I understand, but we have no application before us.
Can I say one thing?
Yes.
Come
Just
on.
come on up. Come on up.
Actually, I
Yep,
can-
absolutely. Come on up.
I get two.
You've been here all night.
All
I'm
night.
not. I think we're giving you the conclusion you want of giving you the opportunity to speak at the next hearing. But absolutely, you go ahead
No,
and
no,
speak now.
just-
You'll have to come back at the next hearing.
I'll come back, I
Okay.
promise. I've been at every one.
Just wanted to make sure you understood that.
I understand.
Okay.
As far as their application and notifying butters,
Yes.
okay, from what I understand, it would be an alteration of premise for the ABC, so we would have to be notified?
Okay. I don't know much about that.
I have reviewed the liquor license. We will certainly do whatever we have to do.
If you change the number of seating on the patio with liquor, it has to be done through the ABC and the butters have to be notified. The problem was during all of Novara, I was not considered an abutter at 566 Adams Street, on the same side, corner of Church and Adams. But yet I'm an abutter to Dunkin' Donuts. So I called the town administrator and she told me to approach the board and ask why that happened.
She's not
That's
technically an
best.
abutter, but there's no reason why she can't be noticed.
No, we're abutters. That's the problem.
It has to
Other-
do with, yeah.
And a butter is actually someone who touches, whose land touches the,
I thought it was within 150 feet.
but people entitled to notice don't have to touch. They can be within a certain distance.
If you took out the public street, I would be touching.
So were you notified by the planning board?
Never.
Okay.
But yet I was notified for Dunkin' Donuts. So there's a problem with, as far as a butter list in Milton. Two, I said they're asking for seating. Right now, it's 20 people, have to be seating, have to eat dinner. Pictures on their website, which I have, show 27 seating on the patio right now. So under any good conscience, how can you sit there and increase it when they're not enforcing the 20 now? And my question is, how do I have it enforced? Because I talked to Mr. Clark, and he said it would be the building inspector. The building inspector is not on after hours, so his suggestion was to call the fire department.
The code enforcement officer, Mr. Clark? Just clarifying, okay.
So.
I mean, the code enforcement officer is the correct answer. None of us can enforce it, unfortunately. Certainly, the fire department has its own, they can enforce capacity. I don't know what the capacity is by the fire code. So it is a code enforcement issue with the building inspector. That is the correct answer. I
When you
can't
make a
answer
rule, when it
beyond
says
that.
20 people on the patio, and there's 27, it's just, oh, well?
It's not it's something that the code enforcement officer needs to enforce somehow. Bill, do you want to speak to that any clearer?
Well-
I mean,
Usually it goes to the code enforcement officer, and he may be able to give some of his power to the police.
he can designate.
The question that was asked to me is if there's a capacity issue goes back to fire department too.
Right.
But again, there may be something that can go back to the police department. I'm not sure about that though. But I know it's the building inspector.
But it-
try to have an answer for you for the next, for
Well,
the
as far
July
as-
14th meeting.
Yeah, as far as the trash, as far as the deliveries, we're having serious problems, and there's no enforcement. And it usually, sometimes it happens when they don't come on until 9. So, you know, right on his website, there's 27 people
I
sitting on
mean,
the patio.
photos can help from an enforcement standpoint, so.
But this is Novara's website.
I
It's
understand.
Facebook.
So I'm just letting, I mean, trash issues could be photographed. I'm not trying to be difficult, I'm telling you that
No,
this
that's
is-
fine. We'll-
This is the mechanism that we hear all the time. We have to deal with the code enforcement officer, so,
But rules are made in Milton and nobody's enforcing them.
well, we don't have a code enforcement officer that works 24 hours a day, though I don't think most towns do. But the code enforcement officer, I think what Mr. Clark is gonna look into for you is whether he's able to designate some of his authority to another person or entity in the town, such as the police department. So we will look into that for you for the 14th as to whether or not that's something he can do.
Okay. Thank you.
And we will see you on the 14th.
So we are prepared to come back on the 14th, but I will be submitting the application. You
In
could-
time
If
for
I
notice.
submit it, we'll try to get it in tomorrow, so,
Okay.
you know, you
I
can
think you should,
proceed.
you should get something from the fire department, because I seen you gestured that it's outside. But typically, even if you set up a tent, you need more than one point of egress, and it appears that you only have one point of egress unless you come back through the building. So I think you should get in touch with the fire department and make sure he's happy with the number of people you're gonna put out there.
So, Mr. McKetrick, what
I
you're-
would intend to do
what-
that.
Yeah, what you're hearing is, we're gonna ask you, so if you can come with a letter, that would be better.
We will go back and confer and receive advice, and anything that we have to do, we will propose in our, if not in our application, when we return for the hearing. So,
Okay.
thank you very much.
If you're gonna do 48, you should probably let the fire department know at that point in time what your intent is, set 48 people out there.
It would be helpful to have you respond to the extent you want to at the hearing.
We do intend to do that, absolutely. yes,
Okay, thank you.
Other agendas,
Okay,
no, the pink ones.
sorry, I lost my place for a minute there. So it looks like we are, just trying to see if there's any other neighborhood business on here. I do not see any.
You've got the informational presentation.
You're right. I guess that's where we should probably head next. Okay, so we're gonna jump to the informational presentation on the ice house zoning. And I'm gonna offer Mr. Clark and Mr. Serwinski an opportunity again, and if not, we'll call for the applicant.
No, Ned.
All right. While they're setting up, to the restaurant.
Ned, you're up. Can I do?
I think the farmer's market was open today.
Well, tell us about it, Tim.
I just passed it by on my bike. I didn't have any money, so I didn't stop and see.
What kind of a bike do you
I
have?
have a truck Elant, which is their commuter hybrid model. It's good.
And how do you find it?
I think it's great. I'm also really looking forward to
Do you
the.
use it in the winter?
No. I take the bus in the winter. But it's relevant to Milton because the connection between the Central Ave end of the bike path and Mattapan Square is coming along. I pass that by every day. Looks like it's going to be a good one.
This is it.
It's sort of between the tracks and the river, and eventually goes under the tracks and crosses the river and goes back to Mattapan.
Before we jump to, sorry. Before we jump to Mr. Corcoran, can we also just quickly check with the clerk's office on that abutter list, just since it came up? Can we just look into that,
I have a
please?
note.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, Mr. Corcoran, welcome, thank you.
Thank you. So we're here to talk about my discussion of the ice house.
That was what we called for, yes.
Thank you. Ned Corcoran, I'm here with Pat McKean, who is, with his brothers, are the owners of the ice house property on the Blue Hills Parkway. I thought a couple of things, to come back and have a brief discussion, update the board on things that have happened since town meeting, and go forward in effort to try to file new zoning for the Ice House property for presentation at town meeting, whenever town meeting might be held this fall, this winter. Since town meeting, we conducted a fairly large neighborhood meeting on March 1st at the library. And we have another one scheduled for next Wednesday, June 29th, I believe it is, 6:30 at the library, so I encourage people to attend. One of the things that we heard at the neighbor meeting was that the notion of adding some housing to the proposal. And so I have a draft of a bylaw that I'm working on that is closer to, in terms of the development scheme, if you will, to what the members of this board put forward as part of the preparation for town meeting on the planned, the non-conforming business use. It would be a combination of the market with fish market and other things as proposed. The buildings are essentially in the same location. The barn would be replaced by a market. We know we've got interest from various markets, fish markets and others out there. They are not and will not able and will not commit in any way to the project unless they know they have zoning in place, but interested in what's going on with zoning. The bank would remain in the bank building as proposed, but the likely upstairs mix may be office above the bank and 2 stories of residential above the market. That seemed to resonate with some, and we'll confirm obviously more of that as we go forward in discussions, but that seemed to resonate with some who were concerned that the project was being developed just for commercial purposes, and that the notion of some rental housing with affordability would be something that would be seen as beneficial. So we'll see whether that is in fact the case as we move forward, but that's the current thinking, that we'll go forward with zoning that would authorize those mixes. And we do think we need town meeting to tell us whether or not it can approve zoning for the site to allow a redevelopment substantially in compliance with the zoning that would be presented. I've also had meetings with DCR. As you know, the Parkway is a DCR parkway. There was some concern expressed in the public meetings about how the parkway would be modified at all. One of the things that DCR expressed to me in meeting on April 29th was the notion that they acutely aware now of issues concerning safe crossings, particularly as a result of the accident that occurred this past winter, that there are no safe crossings or the limited safe crossings on the parkway and the other roads that feed the parkway at the north end, Truman Highway, Blue Hill Avenue, and that these are dense neighborhoods. There's a lot of walking. There's walking to the high school from one side of the park, from the parkway to the other. There's walking to Pierce Middle School from one side of the parkway to the other. There's walking to the Tucker neighborhood, the Tucker Elementary School, and safer crossings need to be provided. They recognize the fact that the parkway, essentially from a point just south of Tucker School, south to Canton Avenue, is dead straight, dead flat, 2 lanes in each direction. It's a speedway. People speed up and they go as fast as they can. They recognize the need to calm the traffic, and putting lights midway on the parkway that would serve a left in and a left out for this property would be beneficial to the operation of the parkway. And so that is an important consideration for us in terms of attracting. The market wants that improved traffic cycle. So we think that conversations that we've had are leading us in a positive direction towards coming back to the board in July with an article. There has been a lot of Facebook chatter you all may be aware of over time. There's one friends group that's completely supportive and working towards being supportive of change at this location, the notion of a market and meeting space and those types of things that can be helpful to the neighborhood are important. Obviously, we need to, the board and others need to hear from them, but we think that there's fairly positive support out there, and we plan to be back. So I thought I would brief the board, see whether or not there are any specific major issues or concerns that the board may have. I have a draft of a bylaw that I'd like to share with the board for consideration, starting on the July 4th meeting.
We're not meeting on July 4th, but we'll meet on July 14th.
Thank you. I'm not going to be around for July 4th. But we'd like to put something forward for the board's consideration. If town meeting is going to happen in October, there's obviously a lot of work to do in a short period of time. It's sounding like we might be looking later into the winter, which softens the schedule and gives more people time to do it. But, you know, there's a lot of work, and in either case, not a lot of time. So I'd like to get a draft of a bylaw to the board to start to consider. There won't be any additional site planning. There's no additional traffic analysis. There's not going to be any other additional work associated with the site other than what was already done. McKean's have spent a lot of money running up to the February town meeting, and their budget is gone. Town, we will be asking the board and the town to support a development concept based on a set of design parameters spelled out in the board that would attract certain type of development. And hopefully collectively we can get there. If we can't, the McKeans will have to make decisions and move on to other things. But their goal is to try and produce a development parameter, set of parameters that can work.
Any comments from the board? I think. Oh, I was going to look over there, I promise.
So,
Seniority.
I have always thought this could be a higher quality development if you integrated housing. I think we talked about that at one point. So I'm happy to hear that that's on the table. I have to say my gut instinct to what you described is I wonder what 3 stories would look like, just in relation to the existing neighborhood. I'm really curious who at DCR has talked to you about signalization of the parkway, because that seems interesting to me.
I've met with Patrice Kish,
Yeah.
Jim Camo.
So that permitting section.
They are permitting and engineering. I've met with both permitting and engineering.
So
We haven't had any detailed discussions. It's been higher level.
Yeah.
This is what we're proposing. Are there showstoppers here that we need to be thinking about? We know that there's concern about, the parkway is historic. It's got its protections. They acknowledge that, it's a parkway, and there are parkways all over the eastern portion of the Commonwealth that have major commercial developments on it. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that a Home Depot was permitted on VFW Parkway.
Yes, that is something I would not support. So just a couple of quick things is I completely agree with what you shared about safe crossings for pedestrians. I feel the same is true for bikes. And there is a bike lane on the parkway that drops at Blue Hill Terrace to Unkwitty Road. And I think that's an existing safety hazard. I would be continually nervous about that if we added some in and out in the commercial capacity, so I would really suggest that you think about it. And I'm, of course, interested in what the neighborhood thinks, but those are just my initial feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Okay. I'm going to jump back to the discussion of the condominium development working group because it seems to tie in nicely with what we just left. And it's the last piece of new business we have. So Alex, I think clearly you and Cheryl were our planning board liaisons for this working group. which was disbanded effectively when the permitting that we were working on was taken off the table, probably going on a year ago at this point. I guess the question is, with what's coming before us with Ice House, with what's coming before us with Carberry, with what's potentially coming before us with the presentation that came to us from Mr. Sullivan last week, is there a reason to bring this group back into operation, whether it meets regularly or it's sort of a subcommittee type advisory group to the board that can be called on as necessary, is the question.
Well, when I last called a meeting of the working group, Cheryl said to me that she disagreed with the composition of the group and disagreed with the mission of the group and wanted some timelines established, and said that this is a matter that should be taken up with the board. And so I didn't necessarily agree, but I thought that we could hear her out and see what the board thought. But it was her idea to do these things, so I assumed that she would take the lead.
All right.
And
understood.
so,
so I guess we're going to continue this discussion.
I would suggest that Cheryl is an important player here.
Right, so let's go ahead and continue this until the 14th. Thanks for that history lesson. Let's talk about the reorganization of the board just for a moment. We looks like we're coming up on our 7th consecutive meeting on the 14th, where we will not have a full board, with no end in sight, with it being summer.
Like the 28th.
28th, or I guess the question is, do we entertain a conversation about it tonight? I mean, I'm not sure if there's any reason not to do it at this point, with just 4 of us here. So I look to any of you for comment on that. I mean, I don't have an objection to moving forward with it tonight. But if you feel strongly we should have a full board, we can push it to the 28th.
I'm game for anything.
All right, it could be exciting.
I've never had this discussion before.
Yeah, well, we don't usually have this much discussion over this issue, to be honest with you. So I guess, how do you feel about it, Mike?
I'm willing to make comment tonight if that's...
I'd love to hear a comment, yeah.
I think we've had some great people. I think you did a great job. I think Emily did a great job. I think we should get Emily's little spiel that she put together before people get to speak in public. I know you conveyed pretty much the same message, but I thought she
does it better.
Did it very
she
succinct.
does it better, I agree.
That she repeated, and it was good. But I just think I'd like to nominate Alex to be our chairman, and the reason being that I just think Alex has a long history in Milton. He has a long history with the planning board. I don't know, but I would venture to guess he's probably written more planning board articles than anybody else. His legal background, I just think he is the most appropriate person to lead the planning board. So I'd like to nominate Alex. I don't know if we wait till we have the full board to make a vote or how we proceed with that.
Well, if we don't have another nomination, then I don't see any reason to wait, but I would...
I was under the assumption that you were acting chair because you were just going to be the next chair, but I don't know how this works, so maybe you can educate me.
So the history is that when Emily stepped down, we did a nomination for 3 months to basically fulfill her chair obligation.
And is there a rhythm to this, or is it just sort of every year you just sort of make up a day?
We reorganize at the first meeting after town meeting, but this year we haven't had enough people present to reorganize.
Oh, I get that part. I mean, is there
So
a
there's been
rhythm
no
to who becomes chair? I mean, does everybody
no.
trade off a year, or
There's been no rhythm to it that I'm aware of.
There was at one point a interesting. When I first got on the board, there were 2 disfavored members. And the 3 other members rotated the chairmanship.
Intentionally to keep the other 2 at bay.
And then things got a little different. I remember that Mr. Carey, what was his name?
George.
George Carey. He was chairman, and he said, I think I want to be chairman again, because my work is not done. And so the rotation has never really devolved into a real practice. And there's been there really isn't any specific practice.
Well, that's good to know. So did you want to stay chair?
I'm willing to stay chair. I think the board is working on a lot of items zoning-wise that have moved along, albeit in various forms of disarray. But certainly we've had some very interesting conversations about zoning over the last, call it 18 months, under Emily and then me subsequently. I would like to see that continue, whether it's in an effort to change the zoning, or if it's an effort to just continue to look at our zoning and be aware of it and have good conversations about it, and not just be reacting to applications that come before us. So I'm willing to stay chair. I think Alex has had a very long history of being chair. I don't know how many times you've been chair, Alex, but certainly he's very capable of being chair as well.
And do you
he
want
has
to be
far more
chair?
experience than I have.
Please pardon my ignorance here. I don't know if you're nominated because Mike knows you want to be chair, or
Doesn't
if
everyone want to be chair?
I don't. Don't nominate me. I just got here. I've worked with you as a chair before on a different committee. I like the way you run this meeting. It's the only way I've ever known this meeting. But I certainly don't want to upset Alex if Alex really wants to be the chair.
We've had a discussion, and shall we just end it and take it up again on the 28th?
Let's do that.
This is kind of an awkward discussion, I have to say. Far more awkward than
Oh,
I thought
it's-
this bullet point meant. I thought it was
Not
just.
awkward at all. I don't think you should see it as awkward. I honestly don't think you should see it as awkward.
I don't, I hope you personally take it sincere when I say that I think you did a great job. I think Emily did a great
Awkwardness
job.
at all right now. I wanted to have the conversation because it's been going on 2 months, and now we'll go on to 3 months. But let's move it to July 28th.
Well,
I need a commitment from everyone to attend that meeting, please.
I will be here, but I kind of feel like I have an obligation. Should I nominate?
You don't have any obligation.
I don't want to create a political dynamic that's awkward, but at the same time, I don't want to leave you hanging either.
I'm not hanging. It's
Okay.
fine. We're
The nomination, April, is easy to do. It's the vote that really is.
That's right.
Great. So I'll be sick on the 28th.
So,
please don't.
let's,
And I have to say, just personally, I think maybe styles are probably different amongst all of us, but I think that this has been so far a very collegial experience for me.
Great.
You've all been very welcoming, so I can't imagine it's going to change a
We've
whole
made great
lot.
strides in the
Just to
last
set
3
you
months.
to set you at ease, it was very much the same one to Emily,
Yeah.
and it was very much the same previously on
Yeah.
Alex.
Yeah.
All right, we'll kick it to the 28th so that we have a full board to talk about it with, because it sounds like we're split right now. I think we can probably look for a motion tonight. I'm not sure we have much more. Do we have anything else from Tim or from Bill? Tim looks like he wants to talk right now.
About signs a little bit.
Oh,
I think we have to, I guess. I was trying to get out of it, but... Well, before we go to signs, quickly, so town meeting, we don't have an update on town meeting, Bill?
No.
Okay. Selectmen are just still taking it under
I can't
advisement.
imagine it will occur in October.
I agree with that.
Because it's just not going to happen.
Right.
So at
Likely
possibly
January?
early December.
They have not taken that vote yet.
Okay.
But
But it will likely happen, but we'll likely have more time, as it sounds like where we're heading.
in order to do that, they're not going to call for a meeting in October. That's the method to do that. They cannot just say, we're going to move it. You either have to have it or don't have it. So it's not that they're going to move it. They will not have one in October. They may call one at another time.
I understand. Okay, got it.
And then they will establish when warrant things have to be.
Fair enough. So it
Yes.
sounds like October will most likely be eliminated this year.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Okay. All right, Tim.
So last week, Bill, Joe Prondak, the building commissioner, and myself had a meeting to discuss some of the thoughts that the board has had and some of the research that I've been doing about process and sort of design standards. A couple things that came out of that meeting. Joe is not, he's sort of agnostic on design, as long as he can enforce it, as long as he can measure it with a tape, he's all set, so that's good. The other thing that he said was, I don't think it's unfair to say that he's not a huge fan of the current bylaw, but he said that one of the things, he didn't use the term that works, but what he said was the thing that he has the least number of problems with is the definitions of signs. I had done a little bit of research into how signs are defined in other towns, how it's different from Milton, how it's the same, and he said, you know, it's the sort of the least broken thing about the current bylaw, and I think at this point,
You saying our definition is good?
I
Of a
wouldn't.
sign.
I
What?
wouldn't.
Of a sign.
Of a sign, it's any color, any,
It's
basically anything.
And one of the things that I presented to him was other towns sort of define a sign in relation to the kind of device or structure or object that the sign is, as opposed to the components of a sign. I think ours is very much concerned with the components, color, light, whatever. But he said that he doesn't have a ton of problems with that.
Wait, it says the word sign, whether exterior, interior, permanent, or temporary, means any object, board, placard, paper, symbol, banner, streamer, letter, number, emblem, logo, color, display, or light, or any combination thereof, which identifies or attracts attention to any property or premises or provides information. I mean, what could be more hopeless than that?
I don't know how he puts a tape to that.
I was a little surprised when he said that, but I'm just calling it like I heard it. I think there is some room to maybe tighten that up.
Yeah. Maybe a little bit of room.
And in terms of sort of like the structure or components of the physical sign, and then sort of the latter part of that definition is sort of the purpose in terms of calling attention, communicating information. Other towns will sort of kind of explicitly say, designed to convey information, and sort of the calling attention aspect of it is not nearly a part of. And it has consequences, because you can imagine, a bright red color calls attention, but it's not conveying information necessarily. So is that a sign or is it not a sign? So I have one of the documents that are in your packets right now is says sign process in the upper left, and that's basically 3 sheets, one of which lays out our current process, and then the next 2 pages are a proposed process for compliant signs and a proposed process for non-compliant signs. And this was sort of the basis of the conversation that Bill and Joe and I had last week. Our current process, if you're familiar with it, there's, as best as I can tell, 10 steps that involve the building commissioner, the planning director, the sign review committee, town council, the board of selectmen. Everyone sort of has their hands in it. We're trying to change that, so I don't think we need to spend too much time on the first page. These are just 2 ideas that I had for compliant signs and non-compliant signs. And basically, the idea being that if we improve the standards that are in the current bylaw, we will see more compliant applications coming in. As it stands, almost every application for a sign is non-compliant and then has to go through this very long and discretionary process. So the hope is that, this page 2 is kind of what really is driving the boat. And so there's 5 actions, and then there's timelines for all of them. But it's basically, you submit an application to the building commissioner, and then the building commissioner determines that, in terms of number, area, types of signs, everything sort of checks the standards, whatever the standards we come up with. Building commissioner forwards his zoning determination, basically the determination that the sign is compliant, to the planning director, who convenes the sign review committee. This is the way that the process kind of works now, except it's a sort of zoning denial letter, and then that triggers a sign review. Sign review committee holds a meeting and evaluates the sign based on sign guidelines. So this is the conversation that we've had, number, type, size, orientation. These are standards that are in the zoning. And then things like materials, colors, relationship to the facade, relationship to other facades. All the things that the sign review committee is doing now get laid out in guidelines that are sort of, we can come up with them and alter them. But it's more of sort of the stuff that, sign review is doing already.
Well, remember that at our meeting with the selectmen, they said, we want standards in our zoning.
Well, and so the standards would be, and I have another sheet with some examples of what the design standards in terms of number and area and to a certain extent type. It says sign design standards in the upper left. So the idea that certain colors and certain materials, my instinct here is that people agree that shouldn't necessarily be in the zoning. That should be in another document that isn't necessarily codified and says you've got to have wooden signs or else you're out. But the standards would be a certain percentage of the facade or a certain size. You can only have a certain number of signs. Things that again,
Lighting?
what was that?
Lighting?
Illumination would be another thing that would be in the zoning. Things that again that the building commissioner can say. He's not the taste police. The sign review committee ostensibly is our taste police.
Who's going to do these standards if the selectmen get out?
Well, so the building commissioner would analyze the standards.
No, who's going to establish
Off
them?
of the standards.
If the selectmen say they want out of the sign review,
Sounds like we are.
the standards?
Planning board, yeah.
Well, so the zoning that this board comes up with would say, the standard for area is 10%
No, I
of the
understand
facade.
that, but the design standards that underlie that the sign review committee.
Are you talking about the guidelines?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so, the guidelines, the planning board could have input, the sign review committee could have, that document ostensibly would be something that,
Someone's got to.
at the end of the day, I think,
Basically, it's going to be the sign review committee, and then it will come back to be reviewed by.
Planning
They're going
board.
to do their own guidelines.
Well, they're the taste police.
They're the what?
They're the taste police.
well, so like the selectmen,
ten words.
via, appointing that committee, and I think, I think our current facade
So the
guidelines.
selectmen are going to not get out. They're going to have to sign
Well,
off on these guidelines.
That would be their last sign act, going out in a blaze of guideline glory.
It wasn't
No, that would be ongoing.
wasn't the idea to
Because
take,
anytime someone wanted to change the guidelines, they'd have to vote on it. If in the future the sign design committee said we'd like to modify our guidelines to
Yeah.
fit current tastes, whatever the change is, the selectmen would have the
Selectmen are back in the sign
obligation
business.
to be
Well,
back
so
in the sign business.
I
Unless
guess
the
that,
zoning were to change, yes.
I thought that was
But
the whole
that's the
concept here.
appropriate place for it. They're the ones who should be regulating something like a.
Presently, the guidelines are,
Done by the selectmen.
they're approved by the selectmen.
Correct.
But I
We don't want to.
I thought the idea here was to
that
do
conversation on
two
town meeting
things,
floor.
which I think Tim did, and that is to set up a process
Yes.
for the review, and also to maybe enact a new bylaw, which sets standards. And I'm
That's-
sure some of the stuff that the
Yes.
sign review committee has, and I know what you were getting at, Tim, about colors and this, but I'm sure some of the guidelines they have could be taken into the bylaw.
I mean, I think that's true as well.
As far as dimensioning and height.
And all that,
Well,
exactly.
and so traditionally, when we say standards, we mean, it's like setbacks, for a lot. I mean, that's a standard that's in the zoning. So, size in terms of either maximum square footage or maximum facade area, height, type in terms of either a wall sign or a projecting sign, or, so these are things that, when we say standards, that's what we mean.
What about light?
Keep forgetting about light.
Let's just always assume that illumination is in there.
So design review board is going to have some teeth, though, because if we're cutting the selectmen out of the process, the design review board is going to have to give a letter of essentially approval to the building inspector in order to grant a building permit, because otherwise, and they're going to have the right to waive certain requirements.
So I actually,
Well, if we updated the bylaw to reflect a lot of these standards that the design review people already look to, when I went to the building commissioner, he'd have the first crack at it. He'd say, everything this guy gives me meets the standard. Keep moving, you're fine. Or he'd say, it's 90% there, but, I think maybe there's something there that's hard to interpret, or, then he goes to the design review people, or maybe they're asking to do something a little different, and it ain't that bad, but you go to the design review.
So
But,
design
the guy
review
comes in
board.
and signs and meets
So
all
then
the
design
standards.
review board is really. So then design review board in that model, which I understand what you're saying, they would actually be informing ZBA as to whether or not ZBA should grant a variance or
Yeah.
a waiver or something.
So-
So they're not informing the building inspector; they're informing the ZBA.
Because, again, it's like approval not required. If
Right.
the guy comes in with a sign that meets all the standards, you're all set.
That was exactly my comment on the process too. Sign review committee isn't necessary if they're compliant.
well,
The problem is we don't have any standards for him to do that by.
But that's exactly right, because otherwise you're making an applicant go through a process that has absolutely no
No
teeth.
bearing on them.
No,
Yeah.
And
it's
it's
all,
irrelevant.
it's all
Right.
abstract.
Right.
So I actually,
Wasting everyone's time.
I had a conversation with the senior planner in Wellesley, who they among the towns that we looked at, they had the most sort of active design review committee. They review signs, they review a lot of the facades in the business district. They meet twice a month, so they have a lot of business before them. And I called her specifically because of the question I had in their zoning, where they say that the recommendation, it's basically an advisory board. And the recommendation they make to their building commissioner is an advisory decision. So they, advise to approve with conditions, or they advise to deny. But the decision ultimately rests with the building commissioner. And so I said, what do you do when, you get, and it's very, I sort of modeled it on their process, where there are standards that you can measure, you can check off the boxes and say, like, this is a zoning compliant sign. Now go to design review to talk about, the relationship to the other buildings, the relationship to the street, the type of, the colors and materials and things like that. I said, what do you do if you have an applicant who, goes through this process and says, I'm not doing any of that? And she said that, that could happen. And the building commissioner would still be obligated to give a sign. That's fine.
Why?
It tends not to.
Why would
Because
it
they're
be
compliant
obligated?
with the
Met all the
bylaw.
standards to
At
start
all
with.
their standards.
But all the standards are just sizes, and
Right.
guidelines have to do with design.
Right.
Right.
So
So he has no
but because
input on
the,
it.
because the
If you hate
guideline.
the design, why can't you deny the sign?
Because the zoning
says.
doesn't say we can
Zoning
deny a
doesn't
sign
say-
for
yeah.
bad design.
Zoning doesn't give the design, in Wellesley, the zoning does
No,
not give the design review board any teeth. That's why I was saying you have to give the
So the
design review
building
board some teeth.
inspector has to be, I don't know,
I mean, the question is, do you make the permit, does one of the criteria or one of the standards require that you must have approval from design review board? And now you're gonna have to go negotiate with design review. I think that might be how Dedham is. You might wanna double check Dedham.
I think if you have fairly good standards, and I know it's probably hard to write for a sign, 90% of the people are going to be
Trying
yes,
to do
no.
that, yeah, and they're going to try to aim for what
And
the
there's going to be
standards
10%
are.
are going to be.
I agree with you, but
Yes, but.
You're
that's-
always gonna get the sleepy sign in
there's-
East
But
Milton
then,
Square.
well, the sleepies
They
would
should- they
clearly.
wouldn't have met the
I
standards
think-
we set up.
Exactly,
I
that's how I feel.
if
It-
you said no sleepy sign, no
Yeah, no,
Dimension-wise, it
forget
would
what
have
they
been
call them
out.
right now, active, moving.
Illumination, it would have been out.
Even,
Yeah,
or
moving
just
parts.
the brightness
Animated.
factor.
Brightness factor.
I mean, if you had a standard saying no sleepy sign, which is basically what the proponents want. They want something in the zoning more than, and this is what the selectmen said when we were with them. They, I know that David said,
But what
we
is the,
want stuff in the zoning that will control what these signs look like.
so under that condition, the sign review committee, in my opinion, design review board, would only exist for the purpose of advising ZBA if someone went and
Yeah.
sought a
Uncompliant,
variance.
Pretty much.
right.
And then ZBA could listen to them or not, but at least you have a taste police
You're
advising.
going to
the
have
board.
somebody who's going to come with a sign that's not going to meet the standards, but we're all going to sit here and look at it and say, geez, that's actually a pretty nice sign. Just because it fell somehow outside of the parameters, and then he can consult with the
But
design
the
review, and they
ZBA
can say, we
can't
agree.
just- But ZBA can't grant a variance unless there's a hardship, and it's gonna be hard to prove hardship on design.
True,
This
true.
wouldn't be a variance.
It'd be a
This
special
would be-
permit.
this would-
Oh, they're giving a
Okay.
special permit. Okay, well, all right, so that's fair. So now so then they can or can't give this.
But I think, again, that you set up the process of how it gets reviewed. Now the thing to do is set up a bylaw that sets the standards for signs so that, I said 90%, 85%, 82%, 80% of the signs are in or out. And the rest of them
and
have
that-
some fluctuation that needs to be reviewed.
And that's the difficult part of it, is establishing the
Standards.
standards. It's easy to say no more than 24 by 24. Don't
Well, I agree,
quote me
because
on that, but there has to be some, I mean, they want.
you're not gonna be able to
people who
regulate
sent this
color.
thing don't want a super petroleum sign. They don't want it, and they want the zoning to say, no super petroleum sign. And that is the tough part of it.
I agree.
Because the people who presented the bylaw said the selectmen are no good. They cave at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, well, our building
And,
inspector is much better.
What?
Our building inspector is much tougher.
Well, I mean, I think we heard from the selectmen, they don't want to be reviewing signs every week, so I
No,
think
I
we need to give them
understand.
an out. But I think that, the other thing is, I'd like to understand what the volume of these things is. When we talk about Dedham, or even Wellesley, that's a much higher volume of commercial signage than we're ever going to see here
They
in
both
my
have very
lifetime.
good, but they both have, the reason we're not talking about Wellesley and Dedham because of the volume,
No, I know.
in my opinion. The reason they've come up is because several people around this table have worked in a plethora of communities in Massachusetts and had to put signs up, whether it's Cheryl or me or whoever from our business. And we know that those towns from the other side of the table are a pain in the neck because they have really good bylaws and really specific bylaws, and you can't get away with anything. And I think that's what we're trying to accomplish, and that seems to be what the proponents want, is specificity and no ability to kind of cheat the process.
So I agree with all of that, but I mean, we have mostly small businesses.
Yeah.
And I don't want to make it a pain in the neck if people are proposing a decent sign that's not going to upset the neighbors and it meets reasonable standard. I don't think we should have them jumping through hoops. And I think to your
I
point,
agree with you. When I say a pain in the neck, I don't mean process. I mean
letting
just
them getting away with it.
I mean control of design.
Right.
And so what we have to balance, and Alex is exactly right. We have to figure out what we want to balance. What do we want to regulate, and what don't we want to regulate? Because you might get some ugly pink signs.
Yep.
Or if you don't like pink, and if but maybe they'll be the right size. So I think we just have to figure out where our stick.
You raise a
where we wanna
good point,
have
though. I mean, there are so few of these things, what maybe the current process,
That's probably why the current process exists, because you're making a point that I make constantly in Milton on vast topics. And that is,
I mean,
how
Dunkin'
many,
Donuts had,
how many 2-acre plots do you see in Milton where someone's going to come in and plop a big old business?
Right.
Are you going to get re-signing of existing commercial businesses? And
Yeah, but I think that might be the issue, right? Isn't that the
volume's
petroleum
small.
issue and the sleepies issue? I mean, those all somehow snuck through. We need to figure out a way that doesn't happen, so that the re-signing doesn't.
Well, we
become an
have
issue.
2 commercial districts, and
No, I know. I'm just saying I want to make sure that the plate turns over or something, or
Sorry, right.
you know, I love their sign, it's fantastic
Not
down
the
in
two big
Central
ones,
Ave. But if someone else goes in there, I want to make sure that we are putting the proper controls in place, that doesn't become a blinking
Well,
Vegas
so-
style something. And I'm not sure that those restrictions are very clear in our bylaw.
I think, I agree, and I think two things. In terms of illumination, I think there are things that are way outside the sort of pale in terms of things that should be acceptable. I think we can very easily prohibit neon, exposed bulbs, even colored illumination.
Or animation of any kind.
And everyone.
Everything
everyone
you
says-
just said, I would agree to animation. The other ones I'd want to have a conversation about.
Well, but I mean, if you're trying to
Neon
not
is
have the
not
sleepy sign
necessarily
again.
bad.
I agree. I mean, the color is not necessarily bad. So these are the conversations
Well,
we're going
I
to
mean-
have. But animation, I think most people are going to agree with.
If you make it fairly strict, and the person can't live to it, they're gonna go to the sign review
There's
committee.
another option.
The sign review committee's gonna say, work with us a little bit,
Exactly.
we'll get you there.
Now you have
we'll
a
get
special
where you
permit.
want.
For the non-compliant sites, that's how I feel.
Well,
I'd
so-
rather err on the side of caution and be
Right.
more strict
Right.
than not. And
For that
if we
simple reason.
need to exact some permissiveness during the process, that can happen at sign review and it's
The
ZBA.
unsaid thing is, if you're strict, there are things outside of the strict limit that we will
According to
Allow.
yeah, and design review
find
board can
receptive,
weigh in on
but
that.
you're just gonna work with people to get there.
But I think also, it gives
can I-
people a quicker path forward if they want to take it.
Right.
If you want to get from to yes immediately, in the easiest way, do the best sign possible, and done.
Let me give you a great example of that. And I'm going to go back to Wellesley because I think their bylaws are fantastic. Except when I have to put up a sign. So in Wellesley, you can't have more than 14-inch high letters. That's just their rule. No matter what you're talking about, it's 14-inch highs. If you have a B, a lowercase b, and a lowercase p, is it 14 inches from the top of the B and the P, or is it 14 inches of the main? So they don't specify. And the building inspector says it's for the B to the P, it's 14 inches. So now you've got to go to design review, and they can give you the special permit to have it be the 14 inch.
Right.
I think that's a good process. I think that's
They
how
pushed you to the people that are
They push
gonna
you to make you go
massage
and
you to
make
get
sure
you right.
you're not being cute.
You're not being crazy,
Right.
and gotta, like you said, come up with some pink flamingos or something, they're just.
Exactly. You're just, you know.
we
And they're
can
going to
live with something
recognize the unique
different, but-
situation of someone that has a those
Right.
two issues, and they're going to work with
Right.
it.
So I think we've made a lot of great points, and I move that we adjourn.
A
We've made so many good
non-discussable
points.
motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.